morning. I didn't hear you. Good morning. There you go. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to personally welcome you to the New Jersey Board of Public Utility Supplier Diversity Development Council Minority Investment Banking Forum. That's a mouthful for the beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Yvette Mouton, and it's truly a blessing, a privilege, and an honor to serve as the New Jersey Board of Public Utility Supplier Diversity Development Council President. I'm also an AT&T Supplier Diversity Manager. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Supplier Diversity Development Council mission before we get started. Our mission is dedicated to forging effective working relationships amongst minority, women, and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses, New Jersey Public Utilities, and the Board of Public Utilities on matters relating to the methods of reporting, measuring, and assessing the development of these relationships. The SCDC serves as a resource to identify best practices and to promote related support activities and seminars for both companies and MWSDVBEs. In order to enhance the advancement of mutual goals, the SCDC promotes the adoption of best practices and processes that provide equal access for MWSDVBEs to companies. The SCDC's commitment to its mission will enhance supplier diversity amongst the New Jersey companies, resulting in the development of a strong economy and a productive environment for the growth of businesses throughout the state. I want to give everybody also a friendly reminder to please silence your cell phones and please refrain from texting and taking calls throughout the forum. This is a lot to take in today, and it's going to be a true blessing for everyone, so we want you to get the most out of it. So now that you know about the SCDC, let me tell you, it's so appropriate that we are at the Robert Treat, because I guarantee you and promise you that we are all in for a good treat. We have an action-packed star lineup today, so let's get the show on the road. However, let me start by giving my gracias, dankeschön, all the merci beaucoup, and the wonderful gratitude for the people who made this happen. As you know, these types of events take a lot of hard work behind the scenes before we show up here today. So I want to acknowledge the people who really, really worked hard to bring this all together. My first stellar player is Emmett Vaughn. He's the Director, Office of Diverse Business Empowerment from Atlantic City Electric Exelon. I will tell you that Emmett reminds me of LeBron James. He is one of the hardest working, committed, excellent, get it done man on the planet. He's a well-oiled machine, and he delivers like a UPS truck. Oh yeah. I've got to tell you how this all started. Last year, the SCDC had its annual conference at Rutgers University, and Emmett walked into the President's Retreat meeting like a ball of fire, and he was talking about all of the need for minority investors to get more business with utilities and companies, and he said, I can make this happen, I can get it done, and let me tell you, here we are 9 months later. It's like a pregnancy. 9 months later, here it is, we're birthing the baby, okay? And it was Emmett who helped this happen. I really want to thank you so very much. So can we give him a round of applause? And Emmett, could you come up? I want to present this to you. The bag's a little frou-frou, but your wife will appreciate it. I told Tom, I said, my last name is Mouton. They call me Coupon Mouton, so I was up last night wrapping these bags so we wouldn't get charged. I always try to save the SCDC money. So thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you. Let's give him another round of applause. We also have Vernice Williams. She's a manager for the Diverse Business Empowerment Atlantic City Exelon Corporation, and she's our Misty Copeland clone. She exudes the grace and strength of a principal dancer. She's the engine behind the machine, and she reminds me of Godiva chocolates because she's smooth and sweet and gets it done. So come on up, Vernice. Give her a round of applause to Vernice. I thought you would like the pink. You're welcome. Also, I know you know who this man is. I don't have to say his name twice. John Harmon, the Jackie Robinson of minority advocacy. Everywhere he goes, everybody knows John. He looks like Jackie Robinson. He's a civil rights advocate like Jackie Robinson, and he's always knocking it out the park and gets it done. So join me in welcoming and thanking John Harmon for his hard work and his advocacy. Thank you, John. This is for you. I want to also thank Femi Malik. He's not here right now. He's with the BPU. He was unable to make it. But Rupal Patel, Rupal, where are you at, dear? Rupal, can you give her a round of applause? She's with the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. And speaking of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, President Moroz is the New Jersey BPU president. If you haven't met President Moroz, you want to meet him. I've been around a long time. This is like my ninth career. I'm like a cat with 9 lives. I've done a lot, and I have to tell you, he is one of the smartest, most efficient, wonderful people I've ever met with. Another get-it-done type of man. He will be there at our September 12th conference at Rutgers University. The SCDC is holding its annual conference. I will tell you, that is a conference to be at. In fact, Robin Tabakin is our chair of the conference. Robin, can you stand up, please? Give her a round of applause. This is our SCDC chair of the conference. Last year, we had over 126 matchmaking sessions. Just about everybody who signed up got a matchmaking session. We talked about cybersecurity. All of the utility presidents were there. It was an excellent networking event. It's coming up on the 12th. You'll see it. We're bringing up a new website. It should be up and running sometime in July, but you'll be getting more information about this. So please save the date for September 12th. It's at the new Livingston campus in Piscataway at Rutgers University. Also, I want to thank all the SCDC board members. Can all the SCDC board members please stand up? Can you give them a round of applause? This is the A-team that makes things happen. I've sat on a lot of boards since I was a young girl, and this is the best board I've ever sat on, and that's the honest goodness truth. The people who are on this board are really committed to what they do, and they get it done. And I wanted you to see who they are, because I want you to use these breaks to go up and speak to the people on this board, because they are very instrumental in making things happen. We're not just here to say we're on the board and to make this all pretty. We really want to make sure that opportunities come out of this event. The other thing I want to do is to thank, excuse me, don't go. I want to, stop, please. I want to thank you, the Robert Treat Hotel staff. Can we give them a round of applause? Can you give her a round of applause, and her staff, please, and all the staff in the back? Again, you know, we show up here, it's done. It's a lot of hard work getting up at 5 in the morning to come here and make this happen, so we thank them. I also want to thank Yvette, another Yvette. She's a ball of energy like me too. Yvette, where are you? Are you with us? She must be outside. She's the event planner, and she stepped in and helped out with all of the logistics here. So, Yvette, there you are. Come on in, sweetheart. Come on. That's Yvette back there. Give her a round of applause, please. She's our event planner. I also want to acknowledge the videographer and photographer. I'm all about mentoring young people. John Miller is our videographer, and he is a recent Howard University Bison graduate, and he's getting ready to go to NYU. So let's support our millennials and youth and help them out. And then we also have representatives from Pepco filming this as well. So give everybody a round of applause for their hard work, because like I said, we get here and, you know, it's a lot of work. So on with the show. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here and we're gathered here today because we are on a very specific mission. The purpose of today's forum is to foster collaboration amongst minority women, service-disabled, and minority veteran-owned financial service firms, consultants, and Fortune 500 companies. So I'm going to briefly walk through the agenda so we know what's going on and logistics of how it's going to work. I hope all of you have one of these agendas. This is one of the nicest agendas I've ever seen. This is nice. I like this. It's very smooth. I've never seen anything like this. It's very nice. Thank you, Yvette. Thank you all for coming here and registering. We're going to get ready to have some welcoming remarks from the BPU Commissioner, Joseph Fortialiso. Then we're going to move on to our plenary session where Kara Wallace will moderate it, and we'll have the panelists Cynthia DiBartilo, Carl Gibbs, and Michael Turner. We're going to have another break, and then after that, we're going to have another plenary session on asset manager and talking about treats. If you've never heard John Rogers speak, you were in for a big treat. He is stellar. He's one of the top-of-the-line financial management investors. I heard him speak, in fact, at one of John's events at the African American Chamber in Princeton last year. He was absolutely wonderful, so you're in for a really big treat. I mean, everybody is wonderful here, but John, absolutely wonderful. We have Brian Aarons from Prudential will be speaking, and Dr. Randall Pinkett from BCT Partners. We'll take another break, and then we're going to have the fireside chat over lunch with, again, John Rogers, and Derek Dingle from Black Enterprise Magazine will be there. And I have to tell you a little secret. I was featured, me and my family and I were featured in Black Enterprise Magazine about 20 years ago. So I have a little connection with Black Enterprise Magazine. They do good work. We also will have As I said, Dr. Dingle will speak on that panel. Then we're going to have a presentation and overview of the Exelon Investment Office of Minority-Owned Investment Manager Program by Brian Anderson. Then we'll move on to the introduction of the one-on-one meeting. Emmett and I will talk to you about how it works. And then we will have those 10 to 15-minute sessions rotating so everybody gets a chance, and then we'll adjourn. And after that, you all can go home and get some sleep and get well rested because we're going to wear you out today, and you'll thank me later. So take advantage of everything that we have going today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. At this juncture, I'm going to introduce the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities Commissioner Joseph Fortialiso. He was born and raised in the Ironbound section of Newark, New Jersey, and the commissioner received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Business Education from Montclair State University and completed graduate and management courses at Montclair State University and Rutgers University. Commissioner Fortialiso served as the Director of Government Relations for the St. Barnabas Health Care System, which is the largest health care provider in the state of New Jersey. From 1967 to 1986, he was an educator of Vailsburg High School and Bloomfield High School, respectively. He was an adjunct professor of accounting at County College of Morris for 12 years. Please help me in joining and welcoming the Commissioner Joseph Fortialiso. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to my neighborhood. As you know, the Ironbound section of Newark is just on the other side of the the Penn Station. And this actually, Ironbound section, is part of the East Ward. And this hotel is in the East Ward. And I don't know if you know the historic background of the Robert Treat Hotel, but it's been here for a long time. And presidents of the United States have actually stayed here. And Franklin Roosevelt stayed here, John Kennedy stayed here. And so it has a illustrious history. So it's great that you're here, and it's great that you're going to be enjoying an awful lot of not only food, but information as you go along during the course of the day. And it's coincidental that 20 years ago this year is when the council was initiated. In 1997, through a Board of Public Utilities resolution, it was initiated. And with the cooperation of our utilities over the years, we have been able, hopefully been able, to promote a level playing field. A level playing field for everyone. That's the goal. And maybe someday we will get there where it is a level playing field. I think we've made great strides, but those strides in that race is never finished. We have to keep working. I remember growing up in the Ironbound section of Newark, son of immigrants. And growing up, it was very evident that the playing field was not level. But as I say, I think we're making great strides, and the work that you're doing and the commitment you have made is only going to make not only New Jersey better, but it's going to make America better. And that's got to be our goal. And that's got to be a goal that we strive for. And the only way we can achieve any of these goals that we're looking at is by working together. We're one country. And if I succeed, you succeed. And if you succeed, I succeed. Unfortunately, not everybody looks at it that way, but that's the way we have to look at it, because only by doing that, we can make New Jersey and America stronger. And that's our goal. So that we all participate in what we like to believe is the American dream. As the son of immigrants, I've been a very fortunate individual, and I believe that I have participated in the American dream. But everybody should have that opportunity. Now, there are going to be some people who don't take advantage of it. That's fine. they have to decide for themselves what they want to do. But the point is, everyone should have the opportunity to strive for that American dream. So on behalf of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, I want to thank you for your work. And I encourage you never to take your foot off the accelerator, because we have a lot of work to do, and it can only be done through the dedication and the hard work of people like you. So I thank you, and I thank you, and I thank you.
You know, thank you, Commissioner. We can really hear your passion and your sincerity. Some people talk the talk but don't walk the walk, and he does, so we're most grateful. At this point, I'm going to call up the investment banking panel to come forward, and I'll introduce them when they get on stage. Yes? I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize. My apologies, everyone. Too much coffee. Okay. At this juncture, we're going to invite David Velazquez up. He's the president and CEO of Pepco Holdings. Mr. Velazquez, give him a round of applause, please. I'll give you a little background about Mr. Velazquez. Mr. Velazquez is responsible for leadership of Pepco Holdings' overall performance associated with service, reliability, and customer satisfaction, financial management, and regulatory and external affairs. Based in Washington, D.C., Pepco Holdings employs more than 4,700 people, owns more than $16.1 billion in assets, and generates approximately $4.8 billion in annual revenues. Pepco Holdings serves 2 million customers as the parent company of Pepco, an electric utility serving Washington, D.C. and suburban Maryland. Delmarva Power, an electric and gas utility serving Delaware and the rest of the Delmarva Peninsula, and Atlantic City Electric, an electric utility serving southern New Jersey. Pepco Holdings is a recently acquired subsidiary of Exelon Corporation, one of the nation's leading energy services companies. Exelon is headquartered in Chicago and trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker EXC. Join me in welcoming Mr. David Velazquez. Thank you so very much, and my apologies.
So good morning to everybody, and thank you for being here. I just wanted to take a moment to add a couple welcoming comments to everyone here as well, and also to thank the Supplier Diversity Development Council for the great work that you're doing. As Commissioner Fiordaliso had said, you know, we are here in order to make sure that we are extending in a broad way the opportunities that are available, the opportunities that we have as the business community. All of us at Exelon and ACE are very much excited to be here, to be able to participate in this forum. You know, diversity and inclusion for both our companies is part of our core values. It's really become part of our DNA and what we do. It's so important to us that we go beyond just saying the fact that this is one of our core values. It's actual business imperative, and we actually have formal goals that we put inside of our business goals every year to make sure that we're continuing to reach out to a diverse group of suppliers across all of our service territories. You know, over the years, those efforts have borne a lot of fruit, and are very proud of the accomplishments both at Exelon and Atlantic City Electric that we've been able to do. For us, it's really about increasing opportunities. Again, as the Commissioner had said, it's about ensuring that there's both broad access and fair access. It goes beyond just building relationships with suppliers. For us, it's also about how we hire employees, where we hire employees, and it's about how we do business every single day. It's our hope that today, by participating in this forum with everyone, that we're going to be able to foster some additional relationships and deepen some relationships between minority-owned financial services firms, between some of the leading consultants, and also corporate investment and treasury functions that we have. You know, on a more personal level, I'll say as leader of Atlantic City Electric and Pepco Holdings, I've been in the energy business for 35 some years. I've seen a lot of change in the business, but our business is changing more quickly and more radically than I think I've ever seen before. Just to give you an example, in our service territory here in New Jersey, 5 years ago, we had about 2,500 customers who use solar to generate power for themselves. Today, that number's over 20,000 and increases every single month. So as we think about, and I think about all that exchange, all that change that is occurring, it is even more important for us to be successful, to be drawing on, I'll say, the best minds, to draw on a set of broad and diverse thinking. You know, one of the lessons I've learned over and over again in business is that when you put the best minds together, when you reach out broadly and find the most diverse set of opinions, the most diverse set of employees, the most diverse set of suppliers, and you're all able to work together, that is how you achieve success. And I'm hopeful today that, along with my colleagues here, that we have an opportunity to see new ways that we can work together, to find new ways to make new connections, because our hope at the end of the day is, again, as the Commissioner had said, that as we are successful, as you are successful, collectively we all become more successful. And that also drives not just our success, but the success of the communities where we all live and the communities that we all have the opportunity to serve. So thank you for being here today.
It's easy to know why he's been in the business for 35 years. And again, we can sense your true passion, and we're so happy to have you. Thank you so very much. Okay, back on track. Now we will bring up the panel with Kara Wilson and Cynthia DiBartolo and Carl Gibbs and Michael Turner. Come forward, please. Thank you. Now, as they're coming up, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about the panelists very briefly. Kara Wallace is the former Chief Diversity of the Office of the New York City Comptroller, Scott M. Stringer. Ms. Wallace served under the Chief Fiscal Officer and Chief Auditing Officer on the city, who was custodian investment advisor of the boards of the pension funds, totaling over $160 billion in assets. As the first Chief Diversity Officer appointed by New York City Comptroller, she created the Office of Diversity Initiatives to deliver innovative solutions to increase contract opportunities for minorities, women, across New York agencies and the private sector. Some of her accomplishments included the collaboration with the corporate governance team. She worked with the Bureau of Asset Management. She released the first Making the Great report card, and she also worked with the Bureau of Asset Management to develop a policy to consider the diversity of professionals. And she also was involved with the launch of the Advisory Council, comprised of experts in supply diversity and MWBE programs to help shape the office's work. Can you give a round of applause to Ms. Kara Wallace? Thank you. Also, we have Ms. Cynthia DiBartolo. She's an attorney, and she's the founder and chairwoman of the CEO of Tigris Financial Partners, and guides the overall strategy and direction of the firm. I love that name, Tigris. It's the energy in that. That's great. You'll have to explain to us how that name came about. That's interesting because, as you know, branding is important, and that's a great name. Before founding Tigris, Ms. DiBartolo held senior management positions at Citigroup, Smith Barney, including Director of Corporate Compliance, Director of Risk Management, and Sales Management of Smith Barney's New York Office for Private Client Services. In addition, she provided support and expertise to a number of business community and philanthropic organizations. She's the founder and president of the Tigris Cares Foundation, providing financial aid and advocacy for head and neck cancer screening and early detection. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you for that. And she graduated cum laude. That's a big one. Cum laude from Wagner College with a BA in political science, and earned a Juris Doctorate from Villanova University School of Law. Ms. DiBartolo holds FINRA Series 7246699 and a New York State life and health insurance license. Ms. DiBartolo was admitted to the Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York State bars. Please help me in joining to welcome Ms. DiBartolo. Thank you. Thank you. We also have Mr. Carl Gibbs. Mr. Carl Gibbs is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Sturdivant. His responsibilities include setting the overall direction of the firm. Mr. Gibbs has over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry. Prior to joining Sturdivant, he served as Executive Vice President at the Harris Capital Partners, a regional brokerage firm, where he oversaw planning, accounting, and financial reporting functions. He began his career at Prudential Insurance Company, where he was a top producer for 3 years. Mr. Gibbs received a Bachelor of Science degree degree in business from the College of New Jersey. He serves on the board of the Chamber of Commerce of Southern New Jersey, the Board of Trustees for the College of New Jersey. Also, he's a treasurer for the National Association of Security Professionals, the Philadelphia chapter, and the Ralph A. Studevant Senior Foundation. Mr. Gibbs is a FINRA Register Series 724, 63, and 87. Can you give him a round of applause, please? I want to pause for a minute and thank the National Association of Security Professionals. I failed to acknowledge them when I was mentioning about who was instrumental in this forum, and they were very, very helpful in getting everyone here, getting the word out. And I also want to acknowledge Malik, who was also very helpful as well. So thank you. Can you give them a round of applause for their help? And we also have Michael Turner. He's the Executive Vice President and Head of the Investment Banking Advisory and Equity Services. Mr. Turner has led Castle Oak's investment banking efforts since October 2008 and has over 25 years of experience as a senior investment banker and capital markets officer covering the energy, utility, financial, and industrial sectors, as well as selected government-sponsored enterprises. At Castle Oak, Mr. Turner manages a multi-sector client coverage effort while leading a team responsible for new business development, client relationship management, and transaction engagement execution. Mr. Turner also holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. Oh, wow. And a BS in Commerce from the University of Virginia. Mr. Turner has served on the board of directors of Chevron Credit Bank and as the president of the board of trustees for the Virginia Athletics Foundation. He holds FINRA Series 7, 79, 24, and 63 licenses as well. So join me in welcoming Mr. Turner. Thank you so much. And at this point, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Good morning, everyone. It is great to see all of you in the audience today. We have a good mix of corporate, nonprofit, educational institutions, large, medium, and small women and minority-owned firms. So it's a very diverse group, and I want to try to make sure during this panel that all of you walk away with some nuggets on how we can continue to grow and scale the minority and women-owned universe of investment managers. So today, I think we're going to predominantly focus on three areas, capital markets, research, some of the advisory services, as well as a little bit of sales and trading, depending on how much time we have. But I really do want you guys to hear from these firms because we have some dynamic institutions up here that have done some great things. So, Michael, why don't you start off telling us a little bit about Castle Oak and why did Black Enterprise name you guys #1 in investment banking last year?
Well, first of all, there's a scoop there for you. I think that will be an announcement that comes out very soon. Castle Oak Securities has only been in existence, but we just celebrated our 10th year. The founders of Castle Oak have roots both with large bulge bracket firms like Merrill Lynch and Prudential Securities, as well as the minority-owned space. Many of us worked for years and years in the early days of corporate investment banking in the mid-90s with the old Blaylock and Partners, which eventually became Blaylock and Companies and Company, and today goes by Blaylock Beal Van, I believe. Castle Oak is a little less than 60 professionals, a very diverse employment team that covers a variety of institutional clients, governmental clients, as well as corporate clients. Castle Oak focuses on corporate banking, advisory services, sales and trading, as well as electronic cash investment solutions. And I think the fact that the firm has evolved at such a steep pace over the course of a short decade is one of the reasons that we've been recognized. I think the other, though, has been a fairly relentless effort to adapt to the changing environment as well as changing client needs. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, a little bit as this panel proceeds. But there's also a quantitative aspect of it, and a lot of this has been recognized by Black Enterprise Magazine over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. We are the #3 underwriter of U.S. corporate bonds overall in the diverse business space. But there's also subsectors, and many of our colleagues here in the audience, as well as on this panel, participate in the agency and government-sponsored enterprise space, and we're a #3 underwriter in that space. There's also the corporate bond space, and we're 4 behind leaders like Williams and Loop and Ramirez in that area. And then there's also an asset-backed space, and within the boutique firms, we've consistently ranked as one of the leading underwriters there, and I think it's a composite of all of those that we got recognized. Fantastic.
Good morning. Thank you for having us today. Our firm is kind of a newbie. We launched during the crisis. I'll give you the backstory to how Tigress Financial Partners was formed and how we got the name Tigress. I'd spent almost 25 years in the industry, and in the interest of being fully transparent, I never wanted to own my own BD. I had been an attorney at Merrill Lynch, a compliance director at Smith Barney, risk management director at Citigroup. Fast forward, my career goes to 2009. I really saw myself retiring within the corporate sector sometime, in the next 25 years from there. But in 2009, corporate America left me. I was serving as risk management director of my firm when I knew I was ill. I had terrible pain in my face and in my head, and I kept thinking my job was priority to my company and not to my health. And finally, in April of 2009, the pain was unbearable, and I went to a doctor, and I was diagnosed with advanced squamous cell carcinoma of the head and neck. A diagnosis of head and neck cancer turned my life upside down. My primary site of my cancer was my tongue. Within 3 weeks of that diagnosis, I had a tracheotomy, a neck dissection, a mandibulotomy to split my face, and a glossectomy to remove my tongue. I did not speak for 2 years. I speak today with a tongue fully reconstructed from both my arms. And that's how the firm got started, because when I wanted to go back to my position at Citigroup, I was advised that my particular disability was too difficult to accommodate because I did not speak, and they didn't believe I'd learned to speak. So I come from tough roots, and my dad looked at me and he said, "Those doctors operated on your tongue, not your brain. You need to figure this out." So I went to see FINRA, and I used a computer and a board. I used a computer to speak for 2 years like Roger Ebert did. And I asked FINRA to have a woman-owned and operated broker-dealer that was sensitive to people with disabilities. And I received the license and aptly named it Tigress Financial Partners. Tigress means fierce woman. So we are woman-owned, and we do take tremendous pride and are proactive in hiring disabled people and being a firm that lives true to its diversity culture.
Well, after that, can you guys hear me? I guess we're the older firm. Good morning. Started the company because we're the older firm because we're approaching almost 30 years of service. And roughly for the first 10 years of the firm, we managed $1.2 billion in a large cap value strategy. 10 years, or in 98, we actually lost one of our partners in the scuba diving accident. And by the way, I started the firm 15 years, so I wasn't there at this particular time. But we lost one of the partners, and the firm had to redevelop itself. And then we became a broker-dealer, primarily providing execution services, fundamental research, and we do have an RRA to manage high net worth individuals. The firm is still relatively small with 9 owners, or 9 employees. One of the things that I wanted to mention in our history is that most recently we did a transaction where we opened up ownership to all the members of the firm. So in November 2015, I became CEO, and through the firm and succession planning, we were able to complete that transaction. And what's more important, or the reason why I raised that point, is typically in the growth in a minority firm or small firm, you don't have that. Either the firm merges with another firm or they go out of business. So Sturtevant is continually trying to set a bar and set a standard of how we should operate and how we should work.
Great, thank you. All right, I want to jump right in. And I think it's important for small firms, where I've seen the most success, is when they really identify and define a great niche area. So I want to jump right into the research services, because you guys all have done research as well as advisory that has really differentiated you. So Cynthia, can you start off talking about yours?
Absolutely. This space is competitive. And in order to compete, you have to have something that differentiates you, something that's disruptive. It's imperative that you think long and hard about what that's going to be. For me, I had 2 years to read and think, and while I was learning to speak. So I did a gap analysis on the firms that were already in existence, and I saw that many of them were execution shops, or they were in the muni space, and very few of them had their own organic research, and nearly none of them had any depth on the international side. So I did try to go out initially to get capital, knowing this would be an undertaking to build a research product, and I was met with the following comments. Cynthia, you're not a bankable CEO given your recent cancer history. Or, women are just not in fashion right now. So those responses forced me to go back to my home and say, I'm going to bank on myself. So I liquidated nearly everything I had, and I came up with close to $3 million, and I took it and I invested it in my firm, and I took the first $2 million and I built out the algorithms for our research product, and that took 18 months of R&D, and today we publish on more than 100 companies from Google, Whole Foods, General Motors, Disney, Coca-Cola. Our analysts are regular commentators on CNBC or Bloomberg. And that same product, because of our methodology, most fundamental analysts look at earnings per share. I also decided to have a disruptive methodology, and I deployed using EVA, economic value, out of the London School of Economics. And our analysts are all specialists in EVA, and that's how they look at companies as opposed to EPS. So it's a quant model with a very robust qualitative overlay, and it is an incredibly important tool, not just for sales and trading with opportunities there, but it's important on the banking side as well, since we can use the methodology on the investment banking side. And our asset management. So we are a broker-dealer, an investment bank, and a registered investment advisor, and we use the same methodology to help our portfolio managers pick stocks. And the Tigris Focused Opportunity Portfolio for the last 3 years was ranked in the top model portfolios by Zacks. Last year, we returned 22.7% versus the S&P. And the methodology has been so unique that we are pleased to announce that we have, will have a joint venture with one of the largest bulge brackets regarding their international portfolio that they are giving to us to work with them and deploy our research overlay on that to help them drive alpha. And, you know, from where I started to today, over the course of years, it has taken capital, but more than capital, it has taken incredible time and patience and resiliency.
I do want to just quickly ask, as you think about these experiences and now where you're having success, as you look to grow and scale, who's that perfect, who buys from you? Who do you target? And what could somebody out there learn in the process that's...
I think everyone, you have to look at everyone as a client and not just focus on the minority space. I think it's critically important to try to build a business that can service the entire spectrum of institutional, retail, ultra-high net clients, both on the domestic and international side. We, because of my background as a specialist in federal securities law, AML in particular, Pershing allowed us to build an international practice with clients out of the Middle East, Europe, Latin America, and Asia. And I think for us, it's those clients don't even know what the word diversity means, but it's being open-minded to building a business that can service the broad community as a whole, but also bring value to the table to compete on meritocracy in the space of diversity.
Thank you. Carl, what about your research? I mean, we're sitting here in the great state of New Jersey, and unfortunately, we all know that for the past few years, minority-owned firms haven't done particularly well here in the state. Not to be political, I happen to know some of the front runners in the gubernatorial race are absolutely looking at MWBEs and how to expand and level the playing field. Carl, your firm is one of the few that has been doing some work. So talk about your research and how you differentiated yourself and really have survived in this.
Sure. Our research has really evolved because when we started out in a traditional way of analysts in various sectors covering various companies. I think at the most, at the peak, we had 5 analysts. And then when we hit kind of 2009, we kind of had a transition. So we do also offer a quantitative product. Currently, we cover 3,000 companies now. And our quantitative product really is based on valuation technicals and catalytic properties, which has been very helpful for us. Our typical client that we're looking for would be your active manager that that's in the mid and small cap space, and that's where we really add benefit or alpha or able to carve out our specialty in our firm. At the end of the day, everything that we do is still wrapped around the execution services that we provide. So we offer that to differentiate ourselves from the rest by that overlay of the research. As it relates to the state of New Jersey, it's really interesting because it's either you're all in or you're all out, depending on the political climate. We hope with the next administration that they're a little more sensitive to inclusion in emerging firms. But over time, we've gone through various cycles as it relates to the understanding and the value add of emerging and minority firms on the broker side and the asset management side.
Thank you. Michael, talk about some of your advisory services at Castle.
Sure. There are 3 broad areas where a full service and investment bank can offer for fee advisory services to corporate, governmental, and institutional clients. One area is obviously the M&A space. There is a world that is not too small to bring in an outside advisor. Probably it's an assignment that is requires too many resources for the internal staff of a business development team for a corporation. On the other hand, the size of a particular engagement may not be so large that you would bring in what we would call a bulge bracket or major bank. I think this mic is a little just a little closer. There we go. So being able to do bolt-on acquisitions or to assist with an exclusive sale is something that we can do in the M&A space for corporate clients, for instance. Another area is to assist with the introduction to or the arrangement of forums where emerging managers and minority-owned investment managers can be introduced to corporate clients or to public pension and asset managers. And then a third area is solutions with regard to cash management and sales and trading. And in our case, we focused on electronic solutions to those kinds of challenges. And those are more along the advisory side of things as opposed to transactional.
Well, I would say it's a cross-section for us, not just the advisory, but it's really also how to get those transactional opportunities. We try to leverage the research that we produce to I'm going to say plant the seed to have a relationship with companies. Because certainly the investor relations folks are happy to speak to you, and they will then become a conduit to Treasury and other places within the firm. So it's critical to try to use a product that you spent a lot of your capital on and try to monetize it in a number of ways, not just in advisory, but clearly trying to either get into transactional, whether it's serving as a co-manager or a selling group on a deal or in a follow-on, or in really what's very important out there is certainly buyback opportunities. And it's when you have a product that's respected, it's amazing that a treasurer will not only take your call, but if he's not at his desk, they will return your call when they realize that you're covering the company, because they value having a minority firm do that. Most of these companies today realize their bottom line is not driven by the dollars from a pale, mail, and stale wallet. It is coming from a diversity wallet, and therefore it's incumbent upon them to figure out how to do business with diversity professional firms, especially financial services.
Yeah, and I recently read about Citibank did an all-women-led bond deal. Can you talk about that?
Yes, in March, this is the second year in a row that Citibank has done this. They did a $2.5 billion note and selected, I believe, 5 women-owned firms, including Tigris, Lebenthal, Maria Ramirez's firm, Telsey, were all on that deal. And that speaks volumes about Citi's commitment to, and C.L. King was on the deal as well, commitment to diversity. And they are one of the only bulge brackets to do that. I think other firms should look at that as best practices and say, how do we do that during Black History Month? How do we do that during different events during the calendar year? It doesn't, and nor does it have to be just once a year, okay? I think you need to celebrate diversity every day and not just on a particular month. And one of the most interesting things, once you start to get in these deals, I know today we just got notice of a selling group through Citigroup, they do recognize you and start to put you in as much as they can. And it takes patience. It doesn't happen. I think everyone on this panel will say, none of the business came overnight, right? Sometimes you think it's never going to happen, and you have to spend quite a bit of time navigating the space because there's a lot of window dressing by companies in the space, and you have to find out who's got real initiatives that you can capitalize on.
Yeah, absolutely, and we do know that it is a relationship game, so building those relationships over time matter.
And before Carl comes, I'll throw a shout out to Siebert, Radford Shank. I think they were involved
you were.
in the deal as well.
Exactly.
In the city deal.
The one comment I wanted to add about diversity, I think diversity is a great avenue for introductions. And I think at the end of the day, we're all going to be measured on how we perform. But the other side of diversity is that diversity is also putting firms into a box. And you just want to be careful from a diversity perspective that you don't get placed in that box and they place limitations on you based on diversity. And I just wanted to add that to the comment.
That is critical.
Yeah, and I think that as we think about diversity and certain programs that were originally set up, I know when John Rogers comes, he'll talk about, we've had conversations where in one sense we'd love to blow up emerging manager programs, but I do think it's a process. You do need to level the playing field. I don't believe in, I think most nowadays, especially where we are today, don't believe in creating and siphoning off small pieces of the pie. The philosophy is always about opening up the whole pie and allowing people access to eat and not just giving them small bites. So hopefully, as we have programs like this, folks can learn from one another on how to basically implement some of the best practices that are out there for minority firms, women-owned firms to thrive, show what they can do, and do even more. And so I'm looking at you, Michael, because I'm going to touch on muni finance for a second, because that's one of the areas in New York State under Governor Patterson. That was somewhat the impetus for the Diversification Act of 2010, because there weren't any minority-owned managers that were senior underwriters running the deals, or book runners. And so through that effort, where we really did go through and look at all the barriers that were, and artificial barriers that were in place, we really made some headway, and we saw Luke, Siebert, Bill, a lot of them become great senior underwriters at the top of the game. Within the last 6 years, we've seen the market change, and several firms have decided not to play anymore. Can you talk about what happened, and as other entities, from the authority and agency side, what should they be thinking about so that we don't lose all of the firms?
That's ironically a great question for Castle Oak. So often we talk about success stories, but we should also talk about lessons that we've learned from things that didn't go as planned. The background there is that in 2011, Castle Oak made an effort to enter the municipal bond underwriting business. In 2015, unfortunately, we had to withdraw from that business. Obviously, you would think that the timing, for reasons that Kyra just described, would be pretty good, and also in the aftermath of the credit crisis, things like Build America bonds and infrastructure spending were all things that one might have thought would have made the timing more ideal. What Castle Oak did, first of all, in order to try to replicate the success that we had had in the corporate market was, first of all, you have to make a dedication to a business, and I made some notes here. We hired 10 people that covered different areas that are required to be successful in that business. Those were municipal bankers, investment bankers that focus on the states, the cities, the municipalities, and some of the other development authorities that are the issuers in that business. There also, you need an underwriting presence, so we hired an underwriter. You need sales and trading presence, and then also you have to be able to provide financial advisory services. So those are all the components one would think would be a key success factor. Also, these were all very, very experienced professionals that had collectively participated in over $700 million or $1 billion worth of business on an aggregate basis. However, some of the hurdles that we encountered is the long cycles that were involved in RFP and underwriting pool processing. That's on the origination side. On the monetization or execution side, we also found that we couldn't monetize participations. We started off with about 20 deals in our first full year, which I think was 2012, and we were in 60 different deals by 2014 or 15. But our ability to monetize those deals by receiving designations from institutional investors was a hurdle. And so for that reason, we found ourselves victim to some of the habits of the old guard or the history there. There's certainly the firms that you named, and I also would add Loop Capital, have been very successful. If we had anything to do different, we'd probably have more boots on the ground in jurisdictions like Illinois and Texas and California and Florida. But there are a lot of hurdles in order to be successful there.
Okay. And as I listen to you speak, as you and others have dropped out, I do always wonder about where's the bench? Who are those next firms that are going to come through in investment banking? So I want to have a little bit of a conversation. All of you are seasoned professionals up here, and so you do have a lot of history. When I joined government, what worried me, or what I lost sleep over, is I felt like a lot of the agencies and authorities were doing the same things that they were doing 20, 25 years ago. So I want to ask this question in a way. It's a two-part, knowing now, if you knew then what you know now, and you're in this in 2017, and you could start your business over again, what would you do differently, or where would you target? And part two is, what would make the landscape? What should the agencies and authorities be doing different to really open it up for you guys?
In terms of the space and how people who select firms, whether they're on the corporate side or the public side, I think that there are some individuals that are antiquated in how they filter firms and apply the process to vet them. I think more importantly today, there has to be emphasis on your risk management and your compliance structure. Critical, because nothing is more serious and probably can't be repaired, such as reputational risk that comes from issues related to compliance and risk management. And I think there has to be some more focus on that. I think there has to be less focus on this magic number of what net capital should be, because there's this arbitrary number that people think everyone should have in terms of net capital. Well, with that comes the question, and we were talking about that today, how much capital do you want to keep sitting on the shelf and not putting to work, and do you really want to pay debt service on capital you're not using? So I think there has to be a broader definition of how net capital is applied based upon your particular business and the risks that come with your business, and not paint everyone with the same brush. Moreover, today it's critical that firms, if we're going to be expecting government, corporations to be diverse, behave in diverse ways, we need to be diverse in how we run our businesses. We need to use diverse vendors. We need to hire diverse talent, because I think it's unfair to ask more of anyone than you're willing to do yourself. So I think those 3 points should be very much part of the evaluation process, looking at a variable net cap depending on what the risks and the business lines of the firm are, looking at the firm's diversity as a whole, and also how strong is that risk management and compliance. Because I think today, one of the things you said, where is the bench? I think it is a scary thought that the bench is thin, and we've seen so many firms not make it in the last couple of years. I think there's more than 12 or 13 firms on the minority side that no longer exist in the last 48 months. That's significant. And some of them are quite small, and probably names you didn't think about. But what's sad about that is that it kind of scarlet letters the whole space. And I don't think we should let any one of our brothers or sisters fail in the space. If we see them having difficulty, I try personally to reach out to those CEOs and see how I can either help them or bolt them on to give them sustainability. And I think going forward, you're not going to see more firms. What you may see is more firms actually rolling into each other where they can leverage their strengths together. Because the cost of doing this business on a one-off can be prohibitive between the regulatory side and just the operational side. So that may keep newbies from actually coming to the surface.
Yeah, like I said, we've been around 30 years, and my personal opinion in net capital is just designed to keep firms out. And that's just my personal opinion. I think net capital, there should be a standard. But when you have such variances where asset managers require $5 million as opposed to $250,000 as a net capital and can't explain that difference, I think it really becomes a challenge to small firms. The second part of that is when you really look at from a trading perspective on an agency basis, it's really your clearing firm that really needs to have the capital, not the broker-dealer. So I make that distinction when you evaluate the whole net capital scenario. The other point that I wanted to bring for anybody that's really considering the broker-dealer space, it's really capital intensive from the standpoint clients don't call and give trades anymore. Everything we do is electronic, and there's a cost to maintain that infrastructure, and it's really expensive. So when you're thinking about your business and where you want to go, and you're thinking about where you want to start, and you're picking either a sector or U.S. domestic equity, which is primarily where most people start. If you were looking, and I'm kind of crossing two questions, but if you were looking to start today, it probably wouldn't be in the domestic U.S. domestic equity space. It would be in the international space because it's a less crowded market. But that capital that's required to be there is probably substantial. And you just kind of need to be informed and recognize how you deploy that capital and what your expected return would be in that business.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I think in the early years of Castle Oak, and certainly in the early years of many of the investment managers, broker-dealers, before us, so much of the emphasis was on, oh, hey, we meet minimum capital levels, or the typical RFI or RFP was just focused on verifying your ownership and asking about your capital stability. If I had it to do over, I would begin immediately the educational process about the full platform, whether that be the portfolio of services or just the experience of your professionals, the compliance infrastructure, the technology infrastructure, and in our case, we emphasize the breadth of our sales and trading operation and the different asset classes, the number of traders, the salespeople, the reach of our network. We also try to educate our clients on the implications of being a passive role player when you've got clients behind that infrastructure and behind those salespeople that are expecting, for instance, allocation on bonds. So that would be one thing that I would do different. There are a couple of other areas that would probably be a more efficient way to go about accelerating participation in different opportunities and programs. One is recognizing the advisors and sources of references that are out there, whether that be the bulge bracket, syndicate desk in the case of corporate underwritings, or the consultants on the asset management side. You probably need to cover that flank very so. And then finally, a third area is just an educational process. Forums like this, where we're fortunate enough to have participants from the Board of Public Utilities or consumer service boards around the country, that helps that clients, whether it be financial services or energy, to understand that their regulators are conversant in the challenges that the minority firms face.
Thank you. Well, we have about 5 minutes left. Are there any burning questions in the audience?
Partnering with, say, private equity firms. I don't know how you interact with them, but the idea behind, especially the boutiques and maybe the mid-size, where in this, obviously it's about profit, they want to make money, but the idea of private equity firms in the boutique and the mid-size kind of pooling their assets and searching out diversity type companies or entities or entrepreneurs. And there's so much competition. They're looking for deals all the time. They make it like they're not, but they are. They've got people out there. I mean, I've gone to family office events, and these guys are trying to figure out how to search out and find deals. And so I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I just think there's got to be an opening there. Mm-hmm. You guys are plugged in, and how would you go about doing that if you had some free time on your hands? I'm sure you don't.
That's a great question. Right. Strategic partnerships really will propel you in this industry. Strategic partnerships not only with private equity and family offices and some of the biggest accounting firms and the law firms. I'm of counsel at Eaton Van Winkle. I do a lot with Crown Moreling. These partnerships are critical to introducing you to opportunity. It's a two-way pipeline, right? They're going to get access for their clients because they're always looking for value for their clients as well. So maybe participate in syndicate, right? The client opens an account with you. The other is you have wealth management services. You have an array of services, investment banking, that they can leverage as well for their clients. But strategic partnerships really should start early on. When I needed a clearing agreement, I sat with some of the, I think 3 or 4 firms. The only firm that really was a strategic partner for me was Pershing. When they heard my story, they were like, well, how many brokers do you have? And again, I couldn't speak, so I'm like this, and they're like, 300? And I'm shaking my head. And they're like, well, how many assets? And they're like, not 300. I had 0 salespeople when I started and 0 assets and accounts. So Pershing became an incredible strategic partner for me because they waived my minimums for more than a year, and they reduced my clearing deposit all the way down to $50,000 to give me oxygen to build a business. So it's incredible, and it takes time to find that strategic partner. And even on right now with this bulge bracket that we finally, it took us a number of years sitting with many bulge bracket firms to try to do exactly what you're talking about, the international side, because it's so prohibitive unless you have analysts with boots on the ground in these countries. To have a legitimate international product is very difficult. You need that bulge bracket to say, you know what, I'm going to give you my analysts that are sitting in Hong Kong and Singapore, and I'm going to work with you on this product. So it's strategic partnership to me is a holistic way of doing the business, and you have to look at every opportunity as a potential strategic.
Well, I thank you for the question as well. It's one of the biggest challenges that we face on the investment banking side. Obviously, the large PE firms, the KKRs and the TCPs, and so forth, they are very good at doing a lot of the services that we'd like to provide internally, including converting their portfolio companies into through IPOs, through handling the capital markets end of it. There are a couple of, I recognize some clients here in the audience, so the folks from PSE&G and Exelon would also recognize the pressures that come from compensating credit providers that might have been behind the acquisition of portfolio companies for PE firms. So with that said, the way that we have attempted to partner or provide services to PE firms is to do very in-depth examinations of their portfolio companies very early on, like you mentioned, not before there's an announcement about a potential IPO, so that we are providing ideas, we are providing leads that may contribute ultimately to adding value for that PE company. But for the most part, they're doing business development and M&A internally. Many have their own capital markets, and if they could, they'd underwrite the securities and not pay the street. But that's a great question and a great challenge.
Okay, so we have come to the end of our time. Carl, Cynthia, Michael, thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, could you remain up here? Could you remain up here for a second? I just have to stop for a moment and say, every day I eat my humble pie, and you're amazing. You know, we all walk in here with a cross on our back. Everybody has a problem in this room. But when I hear stories like that, you know, I ate about a bakery full of humble pie today hearing you. And you know, you walk someplace, you never know what you're going to get out of it. We came in here for investment banking, but we also came in here for another reason, to get motivation. We serve an awesome God, and to hear your story was just compelling, compelling. We have had more than advice here today, and I hope you all understand and receive what's being given to you today. We've had panelists, and Carol, you did a great job. You were so wonderful and so classy and so professional. We have to have you back again in the future. Thank you very much. Cynthia, I just want to recap what you said. I think it was very important. You said bet on yourself. You liquidated and you bet on yourself. You also talked about being patient and positive and it taking time. As an AT&T Supply Diversity Manager, people come to me all the time and say, I want to do business with AT&T, but at the end of the day, I know that. Tell me something I don't know, okay? What I want to know is your differentiator. When I was earlier back getting some coffee, I met Mr. Deutsch, who is also seeking business with AT&T, and my first question is, what is your differentiator? So you gave good advice about being disruptive and being able, this is what you want to present people with at the outset. What's your differentiator? All the other stuff is music to me and background noise. I want to hear what's your differentiator. So thank you for that great advice. Also, Carl, you talked about your differentiator and your research and your quantitative products and you said catalytic properties. Can you tell me what you mean by catalytic properties? I'm just gonna leave my ego at the door right now. Could you please tell us what you mean by catalytic properties?
What that represents is understanding the analysts that cover a particular stock and their ratings are either increasing or decreasing.
Okay.
So, on a quantitative model, you may not know the story, but you understand what the market is saying.
Okay.
So it's having an analysis of what people are saying about, or what analysts are saying about that stuff.
Thank you. Thank you for educating me. Okay, and then also, Michael, you talked about your advisory services. You know, I work for AT&T, so mergers and acquisitions. I don't have to say anything about that, right? Minority investors and solutions for cash management. I will tell you what my pastor always says: open your mouth. Open your mouth and tell people what you do, okay? You have about 5 minutes here to talk to people and work this room and tell people what your differentiators are. So I'm going to go ahead and let us go on break. And please use this time wisely. And again, let's give them a round of applause to this fabulous, fabulous panel. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you. You were just wonderful. Are you guys having a good time? Can you give a round of applause again for this stellar forum? And you know, I want to, I'm going to be talking about Emmett all day today because he's my hero, but I want to thank Exelon again. As you know, this is a cost-free event. I mean, we have some really good, you know, accoutrements here, and they sponsored all this. How often do you get a free event like this of this caliber with these powerhouses coming in? So again, thanks to Emmett and Exelon, and we really appreciate you. Give them another round of applause, please. Thank you so much. Well, as I noted before, we were in for some big treats, and boy, the treats just keep coming, and we have some other delicious treats for you coming right now with the panel that's getting ready to come up to talk about asset management. We have the blessing and privilege of having John Rogers speak and serve as the moderator, and I hope he tells his story about the basketball and that he told at the African American Chamber of Commerce in New Jersey. Didn't you have a little challenge with Barack Obama with a basketball game or something of that sort? So maybe you'll share that story with us before the day is over. It was a very good story. It's all types of hidden figures we have in this room. But with that being said, it is a real honor to bring John in. He's awesome. Like I said, I've seen him speak before. He has a very interesting background, and this is a lesson that we can all take. The first sentence of his bio. John's passion for investing began at age 12. At age 12, when his father began buying him stocks as Christmas and birthday gifts. So I say to you today, if there's something you take away from this room today, perhaps we should follow John's dad's journey and get our kids started young. I can go off. I have a big passion for foster care children and for kids in general, but we need to start our children young to get them on the path where they will be learning. And I don't see any kids today, but oftentimes I'll come to these seminars and children will be here. People bring their kids. So always bear in mind that it's important to plant that seed at a very young age. And we can see that it has bred such success because his dad was watching over him and gave him that seed at a very young age. So he has a very impressive bio, but this sentence struck me the most, the fact that your dad got you groomed at the age of 12. So kudos to your father. His interest in equities grew at Princeton University, where he majored in economics, and over 2+ years he worked as a stockbroker for William Blair & Company, LLC. In 1983, John founded Ariel Investments to employ a patient value strategy in small and medium-sized companies. He strongly believes in giving back to Chicago, sitting on the corporate boards of Exelon and McDonald's, and serving as trustee to the University of Chicago. I also remember the story of how you told us about how you work with young kids and helping them with the programs and teaching them about money management. So you may not think that what you said stuck with me a year or two ago. It did. And I want all the panelists to know, on this break when I was talking to people, the lessons that we're learning here go above and beyond the investment banking. So this has been a very rich seminar, not only intellectually but spiritually as well. So I'm thankful that we are placed here today. Additionally, he's a trustee of Rush University Medical Center and the life trustee of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. As I'm reading these bios, you see one common thread throughout all of these bios is success. And we talk about diversity, but the lives of all of our panelists are diversified. They have intellectual prowess, They have community give back. They're interested in the arts. They're balanced. They're diversified. So again, another takeaway is to diversify your life. You never know where your blessings lie. You know, you could be sitting on a board on the symphony and end up meeting somebody who you can possibly invest their assets. So continue to diversify across the board in all of your life. Your bio is so picture perfect, John. I'm sorry for interrupting and digressing all the time, but you have such a fabulous bio that teaches us from more than one way. Nationally, John is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and a director of the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights. In 2008, he was awarded Princeton University's highest honor, the Woodrow Wilson Award, presented each year to the alumnus whose career embodies a commitment to national service. Following the election of President Barack Obama, John served as a co-chair for the Presidential Inaugural Committee 2009, and more recently, he joined the Barack Obama Foundation's Board of Directors. In 2013, John was featured alongside legendary investors Warren Buffett, Sir John Templeton, and Benjamin Graham in the distinguished book entitled The World's 99 Greatest Investors by Magnus Agenfeld. That's honorable. John received an A. Let's give him a round of applause. This is amazing. Exelon, you knocked it out the park, bringing in the best again. John received an AB in economics from Princeton, where he was also captain of the varsity basketball team. And we hope to hear that story a little later today. But join me in welcoming our moderator, Mr. John Rogers. The stage is a little shaky, and I hope it's not an earthquake, but if you see me rumbling around, it's not me, it's the stage. On our panel this morning, we also have Brian Ahrens, who is a Senior Vice President, Head of Strategic Investment Research Group at Prudential Investments. He and his staff focus on investment consulting, portfolio construction, and risk oversight activities. Currently, the team consults on over $300 billion in total assets. That's a lot of moolah. You want to get a chance to talk to Brian before you leave, okay, ladies and gentlemen? Brian is also a part of a portfolio management team that manages asset allocation strategies totaling over $45 billion in assets. His responsibilities include portfolio risk oversight, management fulfillment, and the allocation of assets among multi-manager sleeves. He has been with Prudential for over 25 years. Brian earned his MBA in finance from the Stern School of Business at NYU. And of course, we know we have another NYU photographer here, and Emmett is out of NYU as well. And he graduated from James Madison University with a double major in finance and German. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Brian Ahrens to the stage. And we have more treats to come. Dr. Randall D. Pinkett is the founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of BCT Partners. He's very humble because I got his bio, but I also was notified that Dr. Pinkett was the 2005 winner of The Apprentice. Let's give him a round of applause. Do you know how hard that was to win that? Absolutely amazing. Dr. Pinkett has established himself as an entrepreneur, speaker, author, and community servant. Here we go again with that community servant. In addition to managing all of BCT Partners' business development efforts, Dr. Pinkett is a highly sought-after speaker for various corporations, colleges, universities, government agencies, and community organizations. He is also co-author of 3 books: Campus CEO, No Money Down CEO, Black Faces in White Places, and the forthcoming Black Faces in High Places. Prior to founding BCT Partners, Dr. Pinkett gained a corporate experience as a member of the technical staff at General Electric, AT&T Bell Laboratories, and Lucent Technologies. Dr. Pinkett is a proud member of the board of directors for the New Jersey Public Policy Research Institute, the nonprofit Technology Enterprise Network, the Institute for Innovation in Government Technology, and he serves as a member of the board of advisors for the Community Technology Centers Network and is the national spokesperson for Autism Speaks. When do you sleep, Dr. Pinkett? Tell me about the coffee that you drink. This is amazing. You are really engaged in a lot of activities. Dr. Pinkett holds 5 degrees. Oh my gosh. 5 degrees, including a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Rutgers University, a Master of Science in Computer Science from the University of Oxford in England, a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering, oh my gosh, a Master of Business Administration, and a PhD from Massachusetts MIT. Dr. Pinkett is a Rhodes Scholar and was the first and only African American ever to receive this prestigious award at Rutgers University. Join me in welcoming, I should say, the Honorable Dr. Randall Pinkett. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Yvette, for that really warm and kind introduction, and I really love the extra flourishes, and it was really, really nice to hear, so appreciate it. We really appreciate the work we do with you at AT&T, which is also, again, greatly appreciated, so thank you. Well, I thought I'd do is have some very, very brief remarks, and again, just one to follow up on a couple of comments that Yvette made during the introduction. The one, start with the basketball. It's a little bit, I did have a lot of good fortune to play with President Obama over the years because I helped recruit his brother-in-law to play at Princeton, where we were teammates for a season. And so when Craig Robinson's little sister married Barack, we ended up being on the court a lot together. But the fun story is that I did have a chance at Michael Jordan's fantasy camp to play Michael Jordan one-on-one, and it was ultimate fantasy, and he played lots of campers, and it's on YouTube, so any of you want to watch, just look up Michael Jordan, John Rogers, you get the full 4 minutes of the short game. But then it's also nice that you mentioned my dad. So I would just say two things. That, you know, my dad was a Tuskegee Airman, and he felt it was very, very important to introduce me to the stock market because he felt that African Americans were often not as fully participating in the stock market as they should, and he wanted to make sure that I got comfortable with the markets at an early age. And it really did change my life. And my dad met my mom the first day of law school, and she was the class of 1946 at the University of Chicago Law School. And she was also a pioneer, being the first African-American female to graduate from the law school. And I was recently looking, she would have turned 95 last week if she was still living, and I was looking at some old papers on her, and she was literally talking about the importance of minority business and having minority businesses involved in professional services 70 years ago. So I come by my passion kind of naturally. You know, I think it's in my DNA to be here sort of still talking about the importance of minority business and getting us included into the parts of the economy when we've often been left out. And that's kind of the message today. It's the message I've had a lot of conversation with Emmett at Exelon and Bill Von Haney at Exelon and the rest of the team there, that it's great that we want to have people involved with all aspects of the economy, but it's really important to have us involved in the parts of the economy where the wealth and jobs and power and influence are being created today, where the margins are the highest and the profits are the highest. I was at a panel in Silicon Valley a couple weeks ago for Asians on corporate boards, and Meg Whitman spoke before I had my panel. And she talked about how the wealth and jobs today are really in two places, you know, financial services and in Silicon Valley, and where it's really all about, you know, this new world. And unfortunately, the old world of manufacturing and supply chain is just not as fast growing. It doesn't have the same kind of margins. And that's an important part of our economy too. It's not to say that that's not important, but we want to make sure that we, as people of color, are included in all aspects of what's happening. So to start the panel, I had a quote from Dr. King that I ran across a few months ago that I love to start it off with. And Dr. King said in 1967, "I cannot see how the Negro will be totally liberated from the crushing weight of poor education, squalid housing, and economic strangulation until he is integrated with power into every level of American life." So that being integrated with power in every level of American life is kind of, again, the theme that we'd like to have today while we're having our panel discussion. So to start off, I want to say that we're going to make this a conversation. We talked to the panelists about having sort of quick back and forth and discussion, and then really want to have a chance, hopefully, to engage the audience in questions too, and feel free to interrupt if something isn't clear, and told the panelists they can interrupt each other too, to make sure that hopefully this is an interesting a little less than an hour that we have together. So thanks so much for your patience, and I'll start off with Brian. First, I'll just to give the highlight of your career. I understand you've been at Prudential for 28 years, and we also appreciate the opportunity to work with you there. So can you talk about how you've started and how you've come to this leadership role that you have that's so important?
Better. So thank you, John. I've been at Prudential all my life. It's the only firm that I've ever worked at, going on now my 29th year. And Prudential has been for me an amazing firm to work for. It's allowed me the opportunity to work in many different areas of the organization. Prudential is an extremely large firm with offices in Hartford and Shelton and Dubuque, Iowa, and we have now offices in London and obviously here at Newark and Woodbridge, New Jersey, and other areas like that. I've had the fortune to work in multiple areas across Prudential and meet a lot of people and experience a lot of the growth of the organization and participate in that. And that really is what's core to Prudential, is allowing their employees the opportunity to see very, very many facets of the organization and kind of cut their teeth. One of the things I tell new people that join Prudential is, half the battle is really knowing who to go to when you're having a challenge with something or working on a project, because at some point in history, someone has probably worked on this before, or something very similar to it, to get a sense and leverage their experience as a result. I've been at Prudential long enough now where I do have pretty well connected throughout the organization, which, as we talk about our Women and Minority Investment Program, has helped us quite a lot in terms of spreading the word of what we're doing, integrating it within Prudential values, and obviously the thought leadership and asset accumulation that we're trying to achieve has helped along those endeavors quite well. Today, just very briefly, I head up an organization that serves as a gatekeeper for Prudential. So any third-party investment manager that manages Prudential client assets has to go through our organization from a due diligence perspective. And once that's achieved, then there's assets that are allocated to that manager and monitored along the simple oversight processes that we have and that you would expect for any sort of gatekeeper across any organization.
So can you talk about, maybe just give us a really quick headline or two on how the assets are broken out? At Exelon, we've got our pension plan, and we have our, the 401k plan, and we have the assets of the nuclear, plants. Yep. How are those assets split up for you guys?
So in broad strokes, we have retail assets, and then we have what I would deem, let's say, institutional assets. The retail assets, which is where my organization primarily is involved with, are assets that are accrued or gathered through Prudential's distribution network. So variable annuities, retirement, individual life, and group life. All of those businesses at Prudential use third-party investment managers. The lion's share of their assets are third-party. And then you have the institutional assets, and I'll say that the institutional assets is the general account. And there in the general account, there's it's quite a substantial sum of assets that the firm has in their general account. And there was also a portion of those assets are managed by third-party investment managers. There's a small portion, the lion's share, is fixed income assets that are managed from Prudential's fixed income area. But that's the breakout.
And what was the inspiration? Now, you guys, my understanding, and being in the business 34 years, most of the large insurance companies have not been willing to work with minority-owned businesses, and a lot of the major anchor institutions in cities like Chicago and Newark haven't been willing to work with minority-owned businesses in the investment world, especially in investment management. So what was the inspiration for you guys to lead the charge in this?
So there was a couple different angles that we had taken here. I've been my job to identify very good investment talent is going on 15 years now, and what we had found is that small firms, boutique firms, if you will, are just amazing, filled with amazing investment talent, and so we tried to pursue those firms as best we can. Some of the challenges is that the amount of assets that we're dealing with that we allocate to gets into concentration risk issues. So if a firm has $1 billion of assets, you can't really give them another $1 billion, then become too much of a concentration of that firm. So first, we definitely did and wanted to do business with small firms. The second thing is part of Prudential's culture, diversification of talent, diversification ideas permeates from the top down. So from the Prudential Board of Directors to John Strangfeld, to Steve Pelletier, Charlie Lowry, all the way on down, it is a constant drumbeat around attracting great talent from women and minorities in our organization to supplier diversification. It is throughout our organization. And that view was finally kind of communicated to me that said, what is your allocation to women and minority-owned firms? And I basically said, it's relatively small. And it's relatively small because of some constraints that I have to work within across the organization. So the board of directors and John Strangfeld said, okay, what do you need to begin to focus on that segment of the market? Whatever you need, you got. And so as a result, I said, well, let's build the program, hire some talent, and begin to invest in women and minority-owned investment firms. So bottom line is there's two things. One was the case around the small firms and doing business with them, the talent that they have. And the second thing said, this is part of the Prudential culture. It came from the top down to just ask the question, what do you need to get it done? And that combination there leads to a program today where we're having about $2.5 billion in assets allocated to women and minority-owned firms. And it's been a very successful program from the metrics that we use to define that.
Maybe one last question before I turn to Randall. I'm really pleased. A lot of people in the room know I believe strongly in the minority and women-owned initiatives. Other places have called the term emerging, and emerging managers sometimes means people of color, but sometimes emerging can mean two white guys who left Goldman Sachs and started a small firm. Yeah. How do you think about that, and how have you evolved around the term emerging to versus minority and women?
So the first mandate that needs for a firm to be part of our investment program, it needs to be majority owned by women and or minorities. That has to be the first cutoff there. And then the second is around asset levels. So it's just a general guideline, of course, but we're looking at around $6 billion and below in terms of assets. But that's not hard and fast rules. What we had found by investing with women and minority-owned firms is that when Prudential allocates money to them, and it could be smallish, if you will, $30 million, the impact of the name alone of Prudential investing with that firm had incredible reverberation in terms of the success of that organization going forward. It opened up doors in terms of other consultants that we're now having another look at the organization, begin to allocate capital. We've allocated capital to a small investment firm in Stamford, Connecticut, that $250 million in assets at the time, that 18 months later is now $1 billion. And they said that pipeline of firms that were thinking about investing with us all of a sudden accelerated simply because Prudential had allocated to them assets. And I thought that size mattered. And of course it does matter to the firm, but the effect that the name alone had of investing with this firm was just tremendous and extraordinary for me.
Well, that's great to hear, because everyone knows in the room, we all start small, but we want to be able to get to be businesses of scale that can last from generation to generation, the way the majority companies do. And so it's nice that you're not stuck with the artificial barriers that can sometimes preclude firms from growing to scale, which we think is so critical, especially in the day and age now where you have multi-trillion-dollar firms that the small guys are competing with.
That's right.
And so even though $6 billion sounds like a lot for those that aren't in the money management industry, it is really a rounding error for those multi-trillion-dollar firms. And we all want to have a chance again to build businesses of scale and size. So it's great to hear you guys are moving in that direction and have already done so. Yeah. So Randall, you have such an extraordinary career, and such amazing different things that you've been able to accomplish.
But I haven't played basketball with Obama and Jordan. You might be the only person that's done both.
I'm not so sure. Well, so tell us about your arc. Tell us about your career arc and how it's all coordinated, because you've had all these diverse successes. And so can you just give us sort of the summary of how you've led from one to another and sort of where your trajectory lies today?
So something we share, John, is that I got turned on to entrepreneurship at a young age and technology. I sold lemonade, I sold candy. I tried to sell my toys to other kids in my neighborhood, and they didn't have any money, so I didn't sell very many toys. My mother found out and said, if you're going to sell the toys, at least give me a cut. And I told her, no, you can't get a cut. And so she shut down my toy store. And then my brother and I wanted a video game when we were young, not an uncommon request for young kids to want a video game. And our father said to us, if you want to play a video game, you have to make the video game. We were like, really, dude? We have to make the video game? He said, you have to make the video game. And so at a young age, my brother and I learned how to write code.
Wow.
In middle school, we were writing code to make video games. Yeah, people looking at me like they're in amazement, which is not uncommon now, right? I mean, a lot of our kids now are technology whiz kids. But that entrepreneurial seed and that technological seed led me to running a technology firm. I've got 3 partners. Lawrence Hibbert, former Merrill Lynch, Jeffrey Robinson, now professor at Rutgers Business School, and Dallas Grundy, a dean at the Wharton School of Business. The 4 of us were college classmates. We banded together with a vision of creating a consulting firm that would use technology to transform corporations and government. And nowadays, our focus is on data analytics and big data. More specifically, our mission is providing unique insights about diverse people that can lead to equity. And so when we talk about diversifying the landscape of asset management and investment and financial services and professional services, not surprisingly, our work is really helping corporations to glean the very insights that can help them to do that work better, or to better engage diverse customers, or to better target diverse stakeholders, or to better understand diverse markets. And we use various data science and analytical techniques to do that. But we've been blessed to be able to do that work with a number of financial services companies. We worked with Prudential, organized their small business conference back in 2015 here in Newark. We're headquartered here in Newark. We worked with Guggenheim, we've worked with Bank of America, we've worked with PNC Bank, a number of organizations, and these issues that we're talking about today are very near and dear to my heart, and also near and dear to our company's heart.
While you're on that point, can you just give us a case study? Because your world is, at least for some of us, it's. I didn't grow up in the technology world. I grew up in finance. Can you tell us a little bit of example of exactly how your technology expertise is helping these companies to move to the next level and the issues that they're addressing?
Right. So we had a customer that was challenged with maintaining diverse professionals in the areas of financial services. And they had been doing what most companies do, which is exit interviews and collecting data on why people left, but didn't quite feel like they were getting the real insights that they wanted to glean. And so they brought us in. We worked with their analytics team, worked with their HR team, and we did exit interviews with minority professionals in financial services that had been gone for at least a year. And in bringing in a third party, we felt like we were going to be able to get more objective information and giving them a year after having left more insight to why they left, having reflected on the reasons that they originally thought might lead to greater opportunity. And it was from analyzing that qualitative data, looking back at the company's exit interview data, looking at some of their employment data, performance management data, performance evaluation data, what were the metrics by which they were evaluating their talent. We were able to come back with recommendations on better measures and metrics for measuring progress and performance, better ways of vetting talent on the front end, better ways of managing talent within the organization, and then perhaps most importantly, better ways of retaining talent so that all the work that goes into finding what are very difficult to find, minority asset managers, women asset managers, that they don't have the attrition that they were experiencing. So we were able to mitigate those numbers.
So can you talk specifically, I know there's again a lot of people here in investment banking and investment management, any specific examples of how you've been able to help one of your clients understand the importance of doing businesses with firms like ours?
Well, absolutely. I just came back from Cleveland for an engagement which was centered around highlighting the business case for diversity and inclusion. We were speaking to executives at the corporation. And we talk a lot about what is the business impact, but not as often do we quantify that. And there's some great numbers that I saw around minority firms in the top quartile, companies in the top quartile of minority diversity outperform their competitors by 35%. Companies with greater gender diversity outperform by 15%. And you can tie some really specific examples from corporations to the bottom line of how diversity has impacted their EBITDA, how it's impacted their bottom line, et cetera. So we briefed executives on that business case, and then we went through a series of trainings throughout the day on unconscious bias and really understanding the impact of implicit bias, unconscious bias, how that impacts perception of vendors, perception of talent, and helping them to think differently about the entire landscape, or should I say the entire life cycle, from how suppliers are identified, how they are vetted, who does and who does not receive RFPs, how they're scored, and then who's brought in to do the work. And then on the workforce side, who's promoted, who's recruited, who's given bonuses, who's given promotions, and how it permeates all two of those life cycles. And so now we're working intensively around coaching with executives, around reorienting training and hiring processes, around data that's collected to measure progress to help them drive diversity on the workforce side and on the supplier diversity side.
So it's interesting. So you use the term supplier diversity, and we talked earlier, I think on the phone, preparing for this. The University of Chicago uses the term business diversity because they're now working with 60 professional services firms at the university that they weren't 10 years ago. And it's everything from advertising and black enterprise, WVON radio in Chicago, to law firms, accounting firms, money managers, everything you can imagine, everyone you can think about. So do you think we should try to get away from that term supplier diversity to be able to get people to think about us outside of this sort of supply chain model that they've been living with for the last 40 years?
Right, so I think there's two paradigms that need to change, John. The first is the idea that we have to necessarily segment minorities or women to a particular set of opportunities, a particular entry point, a particular door to get in the door. I think we've got to explode that assumption and acknowledge that what we're really looking for is good companies that do good work, that meet performance metrics. And I think oftentimes the diversity kind of industry has in some ways segmented us. And I think emerging manager programs, as you described it a moment ago, have had that same challenge. You know, when we talk about limits to how many assets or how, you know, what the cap is on how many the dollars that an asset manager can manage, we need to, I think, explode that. And I think second to your original point, I'm not necessarily, and I know I think you are have issue with supplier diversity per se. I think suppliers, as we've evolved, the traditional model has been goods. And I think in the modern day, and Emmett knows this, it's really goods and services, that we're talking about professional services, asset management, legal services, information technology, the list goes on. So I'm less concerned with that, but I think the underlying point you're raising, and you made the point about Meg Whitman's comments, is that it's a new economy. Yep. And that there's a new set of opportunities that are not necessarily traditionally thought of as supply, but when we talk about innovation, when we talk about what's really transforming financial services, we talked about how you have to have this competitive advantage around your technology, your algorithms, your data, your insights. Like, that's what we should be talking about. I think that the way to frame diversification of suppliers now is around innovation. Yep. It's around how are we really bringing in diverse thought, diverse organizations, diverse capabilities that allow us to innovate in ways that we could not innovate through monolithic companies or, you know, singular ways of looking at the world, looking at problems.
Well, that's great. Well, you're particularly well positioned to sort of be able to make that argument with your experience in technology. So Brian, can you talk some about this? Why do you think major corporations and other anchor institutions have been so slow to move from traditional supply chain into professional services and particular financial services?
I think first it could be, you know, one thing of culture. So if you look at again, as I mentioned before with Prudential, you know, it just permeates throughout our culture around diversification of talent, of perspective. We, you know, I know the studies that you referenced here where firms have better outcomes, have better ROIs, ROEs when they have a diverse board of directors, for example, or diversity at the senior levels. That is something that we all agree with. I think it's backed up by facts, and certainly our organization has embraced that to a great extent. The other, when I take a look at when we built our program, we tried to find out as much information. I know we spoke with your organization, other organizations about programs. There was something about career risk with this, that individuals that would take some risk in investing in a firm that no one's ever heard of, and what happens when that firm underperforms. There is the optics that there's perhaps a sense of career risk as a result of that. Well, when PIMCO underperforms, it might be a little bit of a gimme there, but PIMCO is a great, one of the biggest fixed income firms in the world, really. But if you invest in a small firm that has $1 billion of assets and they underperform, that analyst could have some career risk. And so the perspective from the organization says that's okay. By the way, your business is all about taking risks and taking the right risks and having a process that's consistent throughout everything that you do. If there is some underperformance, you're not at risk around your career whatsoever. That's just how we do business here. And again, I could not emphasize enough the support that I have, my organization has, around from my direct boss all the way up the ladder here, that it's at that level that matters so much in terms of accessing diversity, in terms of, and from where I'm focused on the investment talent in the organization.
So, a lot of us here in the room are entrepreneurs and care about this issue and have worked and had a good fortune to meet people like yourself who are enlightened leaders around these issues, and senior people often are. But sometimes decision makers 2 or 3 or 4 levels below you might have that unconscious bias or implicit bias that Randall talks about. How do you protect against that so that when we walk into those doors, we get the kind of support that we believe we should get?
This is something that is it is communicated frequently among my direct reports as well as my colleagues within Prudential. So my boss will say to us, he said, if I have individuals that directly report to me that all agree with me at the same time, I've got the wrong group of people there. So he very much appreciates diversity of ideas and diversity of perspectives. And that has to be permeated down from my level as well. I've seen organization where it could be at the top, but it just does not trickle down all the way to the bottom. Asking the question, have you looked at everything? What about small firms? To what extent are they competitive from a performance point of view? I'm more interested in understanding the performance and what they can deliver first and foremost, and then certainly focusing on the dynamic of the organization. I know that if you focus and say, well, this is what we want to look for from a cutoff, that won't work if the performance is not there. They have to deliver in terms of quality of services, in our case, quality of risk and return, relative to the larger organizations. That needs to happen first, and to gently reinforce the idea to look at everything, even down to the smaller levels. And when that is reinforced constantly in our organization, then it becomes part of our organization.
Can you just briefly talk about some successes and how you benchmark success, and maybe some examples of successes within your program?
So there's 2 aspects in which we think about success. One certainly is the performance of the managers that we select. And when we compare the managers in our Women and Minority Investment Program from a risk and return perspective, we compare them to everybody. There's no sub-universe here. We're comparing them against the larger organization as well from a risk and return. So there's no haircuts at all. They have to hold their own to the larger organizations. And the program that we have today is holding their own. They're performing quite competitively against all the larger organization. And you think about the distinction that has. We're one of the few firms that have a program that focuses on the smaller segment of the market there, and they're performing quite well. That's a great differentiator for our clients relative to everybody else that's out there. But the second thing is, and this is really important for our organization, and what we spend a lot of time on is the thought leadership and the support in the industry itself. So last year we helped write a white paper on the endowment's perspective on investing in women and minority-owned firms, and what are some of the challenges that they may have. And this year we're developing a white paper in conjunction with Stanford University on unintended bias in terms of selection of investment firms. And what you talked about there is fantastic, and we'd love to connect with you on that topic, because we are just in the early stages of developing this paper that will distribute across the community here, and then begin to talk about that in conferences about what we find with the selection of women and minority-owned firms and the unconscious bias that individuals may have. So that's a it's an important attribute to our program. We have to detail the types of white papers that we write, the conferences that we attend, how we support the speaking engagements, all of that to support from a thought leadership perspective on this very important aspect of our firm.
Well, that's fantastic. And I want to have Randall follow up, and then after that,
So
I'm so pleased to hear you're going to get this call from Prudential about some of these issues that you're exploring.
I've got 70 witnesses too.
So can you tell us what would be the highlights or the kind of thoughts you have to help large institutions overcome the implicit bias, the unconscious bias that's there?
Yeah, I mean, this topic around unconscious bias is gaining a lot of momentum and traction, and to hear Prudential has highlighted the issue among other leading organizations is very encouraging. I'm going to tell a quick story just to demonstrate the power of overcoming unconscious bias. The 5 big orchestras in the country for years had a very difficult time engaging women in the orchestras. They hit a wall at about 12%, knowing that women are about half of our population. 12% of female musicians in the orchestras is unacceptable. So they came up with the idea of doing something very simple: blind auditions. Who's heard this example by show of hands? Okay, I got a couple of hands. So blind auditions, meaning the performer of the flute or the harp or the instrument cannot be seen by the individuals evaluating the talent. Now again, they hit a 12% cap. By that one simple change to the evaluation of the asset manager, I mean the flutist, by that one simple change in the evaluation of the investment banking company, I mean the performer, they had a 5-fold increase of women in the big 5 orchestras. Now think about that. That one simple change. Now if you asked the evaluators of those women, are you biased against women, what would they have said? They'd say no. But by that simple change of removing the visual of who's performing, a 5-fold increase. And so as we're out advising corporations on how do you overcome these biases, part of it is ways of engendering anonymity in the selection process. Part of it is ensuring you have a diverse panel on both sides. A diverse panel of firms vying for opportunity and a diverse panel of people evaluating the talent so that you're getting diverse perspectives on both sides. And then above all, having real accountability. And the real progressive clients we're working with are tying it to compensation, tying it to bonuses, tying it to financial performance, which is driving behaviors of the middle managers who are often the ones where things get blocked. Mm-hmm. It's not lack of executive commitment, which we often see that. It's once it filters down, to your point, to the mid-level, to the mid-managers, that's where things get to a standstill.
So what can we all do? A lot of us sit on boards. We all go to the same conferences. We support a lot of the same progressive political candidates. What kind of advice can you give this audience to take back to try to help resolve this issue and resolve this problem?
I think we have to be vigilant about letting our voices be heard. I grew up here in New Jersey, and I'm just so proud to see what Exelon is doing and the Board of Public Utilities here in New Jersey, because as many of us who've been in business in Jersey for a long time know, and I see John Harmon from the statewide Black Chamber, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. We have not had the environment or the climate here in New Jersey that you see in New York or you see in Philadelphia, our nearby neighbors. And it's almost paradoxical, because what you often see in financial services is oftentimes the public sector leads in the municipal space, in the state space, and then it trickles over to corporate. We're upside down. We've got corporations leading the way, and government is lagging. I just saw Derek Green. Where is Derek? Is Derek still here? Did he leave? All right, Derek is he just stepped out? Okay, Derek is advising one of the leading candidates for governor, and I'm not getting political, Phil Murphy, but there's folks on both sides of the aisle, but we're hearing more conversation. John and I were just talking about this. So we've got to let our voices be heard, because there has not been enough of a stir or a real collective upheaval of disappointment in how Jersey has been so poor on several metrics when it comes to engaging these firms. And I believe that will set the tone and set the stage for a better environment for everyone that we can all benefit.
Thank you. As we move to the audience, I'll make one statement and then turn to Kara, is that, I had a great fortune to be at the National Action Network conference last week on a couple of panels with Reverend Sharpton. Some folks were referencing earlier Rainbow Push's Wall Street Project and Silicon Valley Project. We were there earlier in the year. We all know Urban League will have their convention this summer. NAACP will have it. At least my experience, we've not had enough thoughtful academic presenters to talk about this implicit bias and unconscious bias that is still plaguing our business community. And I think explains part of the lack of opportunity that we've all had and the frustrations a lot of us have. So I think that's one suggestion that I would have. We need to get this on the radar screen of our civil rights leaders. Maybe Black Enterprise could do a cover story on it. And just like Black Enterprise's cover story on Silicon Valley is what got Reverend Jackson to go to Silicon Valley and start to protest the lack of board membership there and executives. And all of a sudden, Hewlett-Packard's got 4 directors, and Apple has their first African-American director. It was all because of the partnership between Black Enterprise and Reverend Jackson. So if we could recreate those types of partnerships between our media, our civil rights leaders, our political leaders, I think we can get at some of these issues and make a difference. So thank you for that little moderator's prerogative there. And turn to Kara.
Yeah. So my question, and I'll start it with a statement first. Last year, there was a majority firm that blew up. There was a Black-owned firm that blew up in the asset management space. Nobody got fired for it. No consultants got let go. And I say nobody in the comptroller's office. So I believe that some of us are still living in archaic times in these old paradigms where maybe back early on in this world and in this space, then individuals the finger got pointed and other firms took the brunt if one failed. But I think we've moved past that. And my question for you guys is, on the inside, as you look at folks on the inside that are still scared of those past happenings, how do we change that? Because that's not really the case anymore. What should that conversation be on the inside when you guys are in those firms and talking about this? Because nobody's getting fired for one firm blowing up.
I think it's either both. And I think in the next questions, maybe we can direct them toward one or the other. And if both want to speak, that's great. But it sounds like we got 2 folks ready to answer Kara's question.
So one of the things that we did is took a look at the failure rates of small firms relative to large firms and the causes of those failure rates and whether they are more frequent than large organizations, and to the extent that they're more frequent. I could name probably 5 or 6 extremely large firms that have failed in the sense of massive outflows of assets and barely have a pulse anymore. And what we found in the study, and this is about perspective, right? Because they'll say, well, one firm failed and it's just a disaster. I'm never going to go in that space anymore. Well, actually, the failure rate of smaller firms is not more than larger organizations. It's more about larger organizations can withstand hits more than smaller firms. Smaller firms can lose a lot of assets, just like large firms, but it can only be maybe for one thing. So if you have a compliance hiccup for a small firm, that could really damage a firm. They won't go out of business, but they'll lose a lot of clients. They'll still be there. larger firms, extremely large firms, can handle that kind of stuff because they have such great diversification of assets and clients, and they may be able to withstand that. So we're providing them with the facts around failure rates of small firms, the frequency of it, why is it happening, and then make that same comparison to the larger firms where there's this comfort level and realize that it's exactly the same. It's the same reasons, and it's the same sort of frequency of that. And we provide that context, then all of a sudden the whole notion of it's a riskier space, I'm more exposed to risk there, is not true. It's optically it may feel like that, but when you look at the facts around it, it's not so.
I agree. It's really being able to market and articulate what those comparative metrics are. And I would add one thing, which I think that the unconscious bias nowadays is actually more influential than the conscious bias. The conscious bias is I'm afraid of getting fired, or I believe there's a risk, or they're not going to perform well. That's a conscious bias against bringing in a diverse company. The unconscious bias, I believe, is the next hurdle that we have to overcome.
One in the front and then one in near the.
Cynthia DiBartolo, thank you for the provocative statements that the three of you made today. The first one that you made, Brian, with respect to small firms and failure, you're quite right, okay? That's not that great a difference. Moreover, smaller firms, minority firms, are devoid of the inherent conflict of interest that these large firms are riddled with. And with that, when you take that out of the equation, it's a more fair and equitable platform to be doing business on. The other thing that you mentioned earlier is that, and I agree with this, and I think you're the first person that's been honest enough to say it. It's not that minority firms don't qualify or they don't deliver the suite of products or the expertise. I think the biggest fear is that the individual decision makers are concerned about how long they're going to get to play at the hoop if, in fact, they pick a minority firm and that firm's performance is not on par. They'd much rather give that money to a Bridgewater or somebody else, because at the end of the day, if they underperform, they could just put up their hands and say, you know, that's... And how do we change that? Does that start with the management? Does that start with the board, letting people know that who are in these seats to make decisions? Why shouldn't John Rogers have more digits next to those assets under management? How do we get the individual decision makers and the committees to know that their jobs are secure if, in fact, they pick minority firms to work with?
I think, you know, and again, my perspective is one perspective in one firm, but it has to be from that top down. It has to be from the seniors all the way on down to the middle and lower level that it's safe to allocate assets. It's a reasonable risk. It's a balanced risk. It's as risky as investing with a larger organization, and there should be no repercussions should something like that not work out over time. And again, we were very fortunate to have that in the firm.
There's a great story of Intuit, who makes TurboTax and the like, where they tried this innovative product offering which involved Best Buy and Russell Simmons, Rush Card, and being able to get your tax refund. It was called Rock Your Refund, and it was a complete disaster. It was horrible. They were targeting Gen Y, and it failed. But the chairman of Intuit brought the team that developed that product to a company-wide meeting and gave them an award. Said, we are recognizing you for failing, for taking a risk, because the only way we're going to innovate is if we take risks. And so we got to create, let me say it differently, people are not afraid of failing. People are afraid of the consequences of failing. If you remove the consequences of failure, now people are able to unleash their innovative power. So it's creating a culture that not only encourages risk, but actually celebrates taking risks.
Okay, I think I've got the message. We have 5 minutes left, so quick questions and quick answers. Hey, John.
For John and Randall, as it relates to will, accountability, and credibility, I want to flip it a little bit as it relates to your experience dealing with African Americans that are positioned, have the authority to lead opportunities,
Well, as you know, John, it's been a question that I've been asking everywhere I go, because we had these great leaders. I speak about Maynard Jackson every week. I got to know him when we were helping to create NASP, and I saw how forceful he was. He was asking these tough questions and demanding answers. And so, as you know, and I try to make a long story short, we created a conference 15 years ago with Russell Reynolds, and now we have Deloitte as a partner too, for African Americans on corporate boards. And now the Latino community and the Asian community has followed in our footsteps and have created their own conferences, which has been terrific. But our inspiration of the conference is every year to have what we call the conscience of the conference, to remind African American business leaders and those that are on the board that they have a responsibility to fight for civil rights and inclusion once they're in that boardroom, and to measure the spending by category with all the minority vendors, and ask their majority vendors about their minority executive ranks and partnership ranks. Exelon does that beautifully. University of Chicago's been doing it wonderfully well. McDonald's does a great job. There's some others that do a great job. But the idea was every year we would have, last year we had Attorney General Holder. We've had Andy Young. We've had John Lewis. We've had Maynard by video after he passed away, talking about what he called was the scared Negro disease that we all had, that we were afraid to speak out once we got into that boardroom, and how heartbroken he was in his career that we weren't willing to do that. Again, we've just had great people who've come to speak to remind people that people literally died to open up these doors for us, and that we have a responsibility to fight for us there. And unfortunately, I don't think that message is being delivered consistently to the next generation of leaders. I think too many people are seeing people who are in leadership roles who are so thrilled to be there, they don't want to do anything to make the white leadership uncomfortable. And then the next generation sees that as the way to get ahead and way to move ahead. And I think that's part of the problem that we've got to overcome. That we've got to remind each other that we're in this together. We've got to, with other progressive leaders, with the Dr. Kings, the Bobby Kennedys, and the others who are willing to fight for these types of issues, and we have to fight for them together. So anyway, that's what our conference is for, is to remind folks. We're hoping ELC will start to do this with their Executive Leadership Council, remind their up-and-coming leaders that this is so important, has to be an important part of their agenda. But I have to say, it's an uphill battle. But every year at the conference, we're able to sort of turn 5 or 6 more people. And as Bobby Kennedy always talks, you have that ripple of hope, and if you can make a little bit of difference step by step, we can all grow together. And then we had one last question. Sorry.
Yes, my question is regarding the minority business owners themselves, I guess, and the companies. What can we do to sort of qualify ourselves? So the companies that you're working with, what's that commonality that is that attractive quality? I can mention performance, maybe that's stating the obvious, but what are those other intangibles? Is it leadership? Is it overall experience? Is it individual acumen spread across the board? What are those things that you can do to better position yourself that when you do present and you are in a competitive situation, that you increase your percentages of being accepted or approved?
Great last question. Brian?
So up until we really had a stronger focus on allocating assets to smaller organizations, I didn't have this perspective as I do today on it. As I mentioned before, performance is what it is, and that's a standard, and across the board, compared to the larger organizations, you need to hold that. So assume that to be the case, and assume that you have great investment talent with good experience. So that I think is relatively easy. What we found that really hurts an organization that gets them passed on is the development of the infrastructure. So, a good trading system, good compliance, maybe an outsourced legal team, a reporting structure that doesn't allow for conflicts of interests. How many times have we seen the compliance officer reporting to the portfolio manager? It just raises all kinds of flags from conflicts of interest. It's the infrastructure of the business itself that matters most. And it is so easy for us to come on in And, the performance is there. We're just going to verify that. Great process, good talent. And then they tell us, and here's how we're structured in our organization. This is how we thought about it. We're built for the future. We're making our investments today. It's very well organized and very well thought out. It is just extraordinary. And I think that is the biggest block. And what we do at Prudential is when we see things like this, we don't step away. We say, we like you, but if you can do these kind of things, we're going to go right on in, and that's going to open doors for others out there. We give them the free feedback that basically says, and some of it's simple. Some of it, just a quick story here, one firm had to put a door in that separates out the technology area from the portfolio management area. Just a simple door is all they needed, because our compliance group noted that when the SEC comes on in, they're going to flag you for this. You'll get a mark on the letter because you didn't have the separation. All you need is a door. They put the door up, easy enough, and then we came back in and said, that works, that's great, and now you're inoculated from an SEC review. You have a clean letter as a result. And that was very, very helpful for that. So it's all infrastructure.
Okay, well, Brian, Randall, thank you. It's world-class answers and super.
Big loud round of applause. Is my mic working here? Okay, great. Thank you so very much. Again, Exelon, Emmett, you brought this panel together. You pulled this off, you and Bernice. This is top of the line, and I don't know if you guys are being enriched the way I'm being enriched, but this is absolutely phenomenal. So please give them another round of applause. I want to recap and comment on some of the sage advice that we received today. John talked about integrating into every level. I've been doing supply diversity. I started with AT&T years ago, actually in sourcing, and I was passionate with it. So I've been doing this for about 20 years. And when you talk about integrating into every aspect, I want to remind people, it goes back to that humble pie again, that everybody is important. Everybody is important. It's not just the people who are at the top. I'll share a personal experience with you. I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office at the height of the O.J. trial. And one of my best colleagues was the maintenance technician. He and I would talk every day, and I got sage advice from him. So know that everybody is important. I want to also stress what Brian talked about, know who to go to. That's so important. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone at the top. It's down the trenches where a lot of the decisions are being made. In addition, you kept mentioning culture. Part of our best-in-class practices at AT&T is to mentor people. And so I'm going to take this quick minute to impart this information to everybody. You need to know the culture of the organization that you're going into. You need to do your homework before you walk in there. I tell people all the time, go online and take a look at the website. You see Randall Stevenson in a blue suit and a white shirt and a red tie, you get an idea that we have a pretty conservative culture. I'm not talking about politically, I'm just talking about that's the culture of AT&T. You go to LL Cool J's website and he'll have a little bald head and maybe a tattoo here and there and a suit on. It's different, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to understand the culture of what you're going into. And I'm a big sports advocate, so I always tell people you have to adjust your game. You have to reset, okay? So you want to know what people are looking for and do your homework before you come to me or you come to a company, okay? At AT&T, we are looking for big data, analytics, Internet of Things. Last year, we had a conference and we talked about cybersecurity. I'm going to give you some information here. If you're going to do business with AT&T, you have to have cybersecurity insurance, okay? Because you're dealing with people's money. In any aspect, you have to have cybersecurity insurance. So stay relevant. I also want to, oh my goodness, Mr. Pinkett, the information you provided was fabulous, and it parlays into what we were talking about with technology. Stay relevant with technology. Know what's going on with technology. Embed that in everything that you're doing. I will digress here and tell you another quick story. When I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, we represent the United States Postal Service. And this was just when the internet was coming on. And the United States Postal Service pushed back on using the internet because it was competing with the Postal Service. So it goes back to what you were saying about fear again. Don't fear your competition. It talks about what Cynthia said, work with and collaborate with people, because when UPS came in and other entities came in, they ate their lunch because they used the logistics of the technology to make them better. So don't look at things as competition and fear things. Always think ahead. And you know, we talk about differentiators. What is AT&T looking for? John Harmon always talks about value proposition. You want to go to an entity with your value proposition. You want to go with your differentiators. You asked a question about what we're looking for. Go on that internet and find out what people are looking for. Do your research. Talk to other people who are doing business with them, with that company, and find out what they need, because your game plan for AT&T may be a different game plan for Exelon. So it's a lot of legwork before you go in. And then finally, I want to give you some more mentoring advice. And this is the Mother Mouton coming out on me, because I'm going to come down on everybody hard on this one. Every person in this room should have a standard question to ask. When we say, okay, are there any questions, I want every hand to go up. This is an opportunity for you to stand up and state your name, state your company, state a good substantive questions to show that you were engaged, and use that. You know how many people are watching you when you do that? So be prepared to always ask good questions when you come in. As my pastor says, open your mouth and speak, be known. Don't be afraid to stand up. I have a question that I always ask people. I used to do, again, with my mentoring, I tell people, ask this question and use this, and I hope somebody in the next session will ask this question. You ask the panel, or if you're going for a job interview, or even if you're on a date, you say, what's the best advice anybody ever gave you, and who gave it to you? That's a really good question to ask, because number one, you will get good advice. Secondly, it empowers the person that you're talking to. And thirdly, you get to know a little bit something personal about them. You know, your dad and your mom, I just am so in awe of how you keep talking about your DNA and how you shared that, you know, it's coming down and it's in your blood. This whole, your mother and your father's coming through, and I'm sure you're passing it on to your children, okay? So make sure that you ask that question, because you'll learn so much. And the other thing, too, is that you always want to establish a personal relationship with people. There's something known as the X factor. I'm big into etiquette, and I'm big into non-tangible things. There's an X factor that you have to have of likability. You know, I was at a conference a long time ago. Somebody came up to me in my face with the finger. I've been trying to get on with AT&T for 8 years. You know, you guys never called me back. And I wanted to say, I know why. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Okay, so, you know, I'm here. Talk to me. I hope all of you go to www.attsupplydiversity.com. I want you to succeed. I'm going to tell you things that other people may not tell you, because I want you to succeed. You know, if something's happening, that I see something about you that can tweak you, I want you to succeed. That's the wonderful thing about our board. Again, I keep talking about the SDC board and how wonderful we are. We balance each other. People will pull me aside and say, Yvette, you need to do this, or Yvette, you don't need to do this. John's my right-hand man. Robin, Stacy, Sue Hogan, the poster child of supplier diversity. And this is a good question that you raised about whether or not we should change this perspective, because, you know, what's in a name? But at the end of the day, I want everybody to make sure that you meet somebody new here, go to somebody that you may not approach. I know, again, Mr. Deutsch, you were with an Asian firm, and he said to me, I know I don't look Asian. You know, this is what we want. We want diversity in this room, so don't assume just because somebody looks like a white male doesn't mean that they're not in a diverse firm. I want you to make sure that you go outside your box today and meet somebody and integrate with somebody who you normally wouldn't integrate with. So, on that note, I also want to talk about a little housekeeping. We are leaving, so take all of your belongings, okay? We're not coming back. We're going on to New Waters up on the second floor in the Crystal Room. The powder rooms are to the left, and we will reconvene. The lunch starts at, 12:30 in the Crystal Room. So go ahead and take care of all your matters, but please make sure that you meet somebody here today that is different than what you would normally meet. And I hope you are you enjoying it here? Can I give a round of applause again for all the wonderful panels? Okay, take your break, more to come. Thanks for coming out. Serving yourselves again, please make it as fast as possible, but I'm going to need everybody to sit down on their seats right now if you're not going to get something to eat, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to ask everybody to cease and desist from speaking so that I can introduce the next round. So, as you know, earlier I introduced the wonderful John Rogers, so I'm not going to go through his bio again, but he will be also participating as the main speaker in the fireside chat. He is the chairman and CEO and chief investment officer of Ariel Investments. And we have another treat. I'm telling you, the treat's just coming. This time, it's Mr. Derek T. Dingle, the Senior Executive Editor for Black Enterprise Magazine. Derek T. Dingle is a Senior Vice President, Editor-in-Chief of Black Magazine. He is responsible for the strategic planning and editorial direction of the magazine and has executive oversight of both Black Enterprise television shows, Black Enterprise Business Report, and Our World with Black Enterprise. He also oversees content development for the Black Enterprise Entrepreneurs Conference and Expo and other events related to the company. Dingle has authored countless Black Enterprise cover stories and throughout his tenure with the magazine, and has appeared as a business expert on numerous television networks and radio programs, including CNN, CNBC, NBC's Weekend Today, and National Public Radio. Prior to becoming editor-in-chief of Black Enterprise Magazine, Dingle served as the publication's executive director from 2000 to July 2008, and managing editor from 1987 to 1990. Prior to rejoining Black Enterprise, he was a senior writer at Money Magazine, covering mutual funds and small business issues. Earlier in his career, Dingle founded and served as president and CEO of Milestone Media, Inc., the nation's largest Black-owned comic book company. Distributed by DC Comics, Milestone produced an average of 8 monthly titles and sold more than 10 million copies from 1992 to 1998. One of the characters he co-created, Static Shock, was developed into an animated series that ran from 2000 to 2005 on the WB Network and the Cartoon Network. An award-winning editor, Dingle is the author of Titans in the BE 100s, Black CEOs Who Redefined and Conquered American Business. And he received the 1999 International Reading Association Award for his first book, First in the Field, and you know, John's gonna love this, Jackie Robinson, Baseball Hero. And you know, for those of you who were here earlier, you know that John Harmon is our Jackie Robinson of the SCDC. So that's really phenomenal. And Jackie Robinson is one of those unsung heroes that a lot of people don't understand about his civil rights advocacy, so that's excellent that you wrote a book in that field. Dingle is a member of the National Association of Black Journalists and the American Society of Magazine Editors. He also serves on the board of Norfolk State University School of Communications. Dingle graduated from Norfolk State University with a bachelor's degree in journalism. He also holds a diploma from NYU's Magazine Management Program. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. John Rogers and also Mr. Derek T. Dingle back to the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yvette. I'd also like to thank Emmett Vaughn for helping to organize this session and to inviting me to participate, as well as the Supplier Development Council. This is a great outing. I was in the last session, and John always does a masterful job, so now I get a chance to put him on the hot seat. I have had the pleasure last week, and John will appreciate this, especially with his hero, of interviewing Hank Aaron. And Hank Aaron is going to be our A.G. Gaston award winner, award recipient at our Black Enterprise Entrepreneurs Summit in Houston on May 17th through the 20th. You like how I put in that ad. But I am equally pleased and equally proud to be having this fireside chat with John Rogers, who is also a home run king in the area of mutual funds and investing. Let's give John a round of applause. And there's one last thing I'd like to say about John that also requires a round of applause. John has been had started Ariel Investments in 1984. However, Ariel Fund celebrated its 30th anniversary last year. The fund. So let's give John a round of applause for that. And in the spirit of transparency, John, also thank you for helping me get my my first home, because I invested in Ariel, and that I used some of those funds for the down payment. So, John, we talked about in the last session supplier diversity and asset management, and I think today is fortuitous to talk about that, because the Knight Foundation released a report on asset management, diverse asset management, and I know you work with the Knight Foundation on the Diverse Asset Management Initiative. And what they reported was that, and I'm going to read from their release that's going to be appear. The report's going to appear on Black Enterprise. A new study sheds light on the low level of diversity in the $71.4 trillion asset management industry, with firms owned by women and minorities managing only 1.1% of the total assets under management. That's a study that came out actually today, commissioned by the Knight Foundation. The study grew out of the Knight's efforts to diversify its endowment investments, which has moved $472 million of its endowments, or 22%, to those managed by women and minority-owned businesses. And the quote was, "Diverse-owned firms are underutilized by institutional investors." And there's a quote from Juan Martinez, Knight Foundation CFO, and they made a conscious decision to make the change. But what's interesting is the data is in line with other studies that show just a underutilization of diverse asset managers. Having been in the game 30 years, what is your outlook? And is it harder today for Ariel to gain accounts and clients in the asset management space as it was 30 years ago?
Well, you have a lot there in that question. So let me start with the Knight Foundation report, though, because I was on the board at the Knight Foundation for 13 years. And they're one of the rare foundations in the United States that are willing to work with minority and women-owned businesses. It's just shocking to me that the major universities in this country, the major endowments, it is basically like baseball in 1940. White men only apply. And in Chicago, for example, which is the town I know best, as I talked about, the University of Chicago has 15 minority firms working with them for their endowment. DePaul, Loyola, Roosevelt, Columbia College have zero. They have absolutely no interest in working with minority-owned businesses. The biggest foundations in Chicago, outside of the McCormick Trust that has just created a 5% goal, and the Chicago Community Trust that's had a long-term goal, the other major foundations, Joyce Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, don't want to work with people of color. So it's an area where you would expect the best practices. You would expect foundations that care about diversity and inclusion would be allowing us to participate fully in the spend that they have. You would think universities and hospitals that care about diversity and inclusion and talk about it would be using minority firms. And so it's been just surprising that that's been where we found the most resistance. I tell people if you were on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give public pension plans, like where Cara used to work, an 8, New York City and New York State being the two of the leaders in the United States. I'd give corporate America maybe a 5, 6, and I would give the foundation and endowment world a 1. And they are by far the worst. So the other part of your question is that I'm optimistic, though, that with this new report coming out by Knight Foundation, with the Diversified Asset Manager Initiative that's run by Robert Rabin out of Washington, D.C., there is a lot of energy now to try to get these doors open for the first time. And again, they have nowhere to hide, because the standard answer you get from a university president is we used a minority construction firm on our latest building. And I tell them all the time, I said, you know that you can't say the black and brown people do the construction and the white men get to do the hedge funds and private equity and venture capital and become multi-billionaires like Henry Kravitz or George Soros or David Rubenstein or Bruce Rauner. It just doesn't make sense that you're going to segregate us that way. And I tell them it's a modern-day Jim Crow to have the black and brown people just participating in one part of the economy and often the part of the economy where the least wealth and jobs and power and influence are created in today's economy.
So how do you, and I'm going to go back to where Ariel is in terms of its ability to gain access. So how do you break that barrier? How do you get more firms to gain opportunities to manage funds of endowments, of foundations, and of pension funds?
Well, you know, at Ariel, we try not to just, a friend of mine says, admire the problem, but to try to have some solutions.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you both of the things we're doing. One I touched on earlier. In our Black Directors Conference, we think is critical, where we have this conference once a year, as I mentioned, with Deloitte and Russell Reynolds as our partner. Last year, we had 160 African American and Latino directors come to the conference for 3 days. And the idea there is, how do we inspire our diverse directors to fight for civil rights and inclusion once they're in the boardroom? The presumption hypothesis of starting the conference 15 years ago was we sat there quietly and allowed the way that business has been done traditionally in this country to continue, and that we are often shy about pressing the issue the way a Maynard Jackson or Harold Washington would do from a political standpoint. So our first answer is we've got to get our directors that are on corporate boards, who all are the same people, of course, who sit on nonprofit boards, the same people who are involved with our civil rights organizations, having them on message that they've got to go into that boardroom and fight for our community. To say, we know a lot of wealth's being created by who's managing that pension fund. We want to see people that look like us there. We know you're advertising a lot in Time Magazine or Fortune or Forbes. Why aren't we advertising in Black Enterprise and Ebony? And ask those types of questions consistently around everything that's being spent by that corporation and measure that spend by category. So that's the first answer to your question for us, is we've got to get our leaders to be willing to go into those boardrooms and leaders in corporations and change the way things have been done and not accept the status quo. Because otherwise, you're actually doing more damage than you can imagine, because if you don't speak out, the white CEO is going to say, things must be A-okay. My minority director isn't saying anything's wrong, so I'm going to continue to do things the way I've always done it. The second thing that we've just recently announced at Ariel, and you guys were nice to report on it, we created an internship program for African American and Latino and women students at the University of Chicago to get paid internships at endowment offices throughout the United States. And the idea is that we've not been exposed to this world of, you can be the old guy who used to run Harvard's investment management, the guy who worked for Harvard and oversaw their endowment. Anybody know how much he made in his top year? The guy who was the CIO of Harvard. Still want to take a guess? How much? $2 million. He made over $20 million. Some in the industry know that, working at Harvard. Now, that's one thing, and we found right now, we've done some research, we can only identify 3 African-American CIOs of major endowments in the United States of over $1 billion. 3 in the whole country. And again, these are great jobs. You can make anywhere from $2 to $20 million a year running the endowment. But then, of course, if you're working in an endowment office, you're getting exposed to the private equity guys, the hedge fund guys, the venture capital guys who are calling on you all the time, the long-only managers. And as we know, the top guys in that field are making even more. So, John Paulson is the person who's made the most money in the last 10 years being in a hedge fund. And someone who's not in the industry, guess how much did John Paulson, the top hedge fund, make in his peak year right after the financial crisis? 1 year's compensation. How much? About $1 billion. He made $5 billion 1 year. $100 million a week. So, long answer to your question, Derek, is why we need to get exposed to this sector, because you can bet, not only is John Paulson simply not hiring people that look like us to work for his firm, but he gave $400 million to Harvard. He gave $100 million to Central Park, which I'm sure needed more trees. But what we're going to be doing, if some of us were able to have firms of scale and size, think of what we would do for our churches, our civil rights organizations, the kind of people we would employ, the kind of contracts that we would let out, the opportunities that we would create if there were minority firms like that that have that kind of level of success, and the ripple effects of all of that. So I think that's why this endowment world is so important, that we democratize it and have us really fully participate in that part of our economy where we've been shut out almost completely.
And we've talked about the fact that it starts with the board, and it starts with the composition of the board. And at Black Enterprise, for the last 4 years, we've done a board diversity study, and we found that on the S&P 300, that there are 30% of the boards don't have any African Americans on those boards. But it's more than that. It's not just the fact that you may have an African American on the board, but you may have an African American on the board that doesn't provide any impact or doesn't give any voice. Share with us, in terms of your work of board development and diversity, how we can get more activist board members to change the equation.
Well, we've talked about this, Derek, and I've talked to Butch Graves, who runs Black Enterprise, about this. I think one of the things we have to do is stop celebrating the directors that aren't doing anything. Because a lot of times we're out there honoring these folks, giving them awards at dinners, putting them on the cover, and no one's ever asking that question, what have you done for your community in your leadership role? It's funny, I've been on the Urban League board for 35 years, and 1 more year older than Ariel. And it took me 25 years to start asking that question in our governance committee meetings once a year. If we're going to put this new person on the board, what have they done in Chicago to prove that they care about our issues and care about our community? Typically, we would just put someone on the board who had written a big check to our big Golden Fellowship dinner the year before. And they work for a big bank or a big utility, and so they go on the board automatically. And no one really asking what they've actually done to move the civil rights agenda forward. So I think we have to stop celebrating those that aren't, and then celebrate those that are. There are people out there like, Bruce Gordon, who's on the board of CBS, who's fantastic. And you know a lot of these folks. I won't go through all, but the late Congressman Bill Gray was fantastic. There's guys in California who've done a great job, like Lloyd Dean, and there's Bernard Lloyd, and there's just Bernard Tyson, rather, and Lloyd Dean. There's just an extraordinary group of people throughout the country, and they need to be celebrated for what they're doing to move our community forward, so they become role models for the next generation of leaders. Because every time we honor and reward those that aren't doing the right things and allow them to have a platform to tell people about how they've gotten ahead by not thinking about anybody else but themselves, we perpetuate that type of behavior. We need to celebrate those that are willing, again, to take those risks the way Dr. King did, the way Maynard did, and others who understood that was the responsibility to fight, because people sacrifice so much to get these doors open.
So, it's one thing to say identifying them, but it's how do you infuse that, and to a certain degree it's courage. As our publisher and founder, Earl Grey Sr. always said, it sometimes is going into harm's way. And you're seeing this phenomenon of this non-activism. Also in areas where African Americans have control. There are a number, and I've talked to some asset management, some HBCUs that don't have African American asset managers. So how do you address that? How do you change that equation?
Well, again, it's up to us. I'd pivot again, saying the same thing. We sit on those boards. So we have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, we all know our community. When we get together for dinners with our friends or weekends after church, lunch, brunch, or whatever it is, we're going to be talking about these issues and how important it is for us to move forward and talking about the discrimination that we face and the implicit bias that's still out there. So we talk about it with our friends and family, then we go back in the corporate world and pretend that everything's perfect, that we've made all this progress. So we've got to try to, all I can say is, for those types of institutions, we've got to inspire us to understand it's up to us, because the white guys who are running those institutions, they've got their own agenda. They've got their own charities and churches and their own, their profit margins they're trying to increase and goals they're getting at. So they're not going to think about this stuff on their own. We got to remind them that things have gone backwards the last 35 years, and since things have gotten much worse for our community from a business standpoint. And if we don't say it, no one else will. The other group that's interesting you didn't mention is the athletes. Up until this last year, Under Armour had no African Americans on their board and very few executives. Well, if Stephen Curry or other big customers said, we want to see you using minority law firms, we want to see Under Armour ads in Ebony and Black Enterprise, We want to see you using black technology firms and insurance firms and everything. What's Kevin Plank going to say? No, it's not important, you know. But the athletes have the power. They have the influence. They can make those institutions do the right thing, you know. And typically, again, it's a whitewash. Not only they had no African Americans on the board up until recently at Under Armour, but then again, they didn't spend any money meaningfully with minority-owned businesses. And again, we just let it happen.
Well, thank you for letting us know that. That's another story. In terms of
Black
looking
enterprise.
at the the firms coming up, the pipeline, and I think that's key. And Butch had talked about this quite a bit, and he had promoted this whole issue of scale and the ability to have firms ready when there are contracting opportunities, because we've challenged corporations, and then once the corporations come to us and they said they've had a $70 million contract, we were challenged with finding a firm that could fulfill that contract. And then we, obviously brought together partnerships so that they could fulfill it. What is the pipeline that you see in terms of the growth of asset management firms? Because we developed the list of asset management firms, and we've been doing that since 2000. But the players haven't changed. So what's happening with the pipeline, and what are you and the other B100s doing to increase that pipeline and give them, the opportunities to play in the game?
It's interesting that Black Enterprise does this great list of the top, asset managers every year, and the list, a lot of the names have disappeared completely from the list.
Exactly.
I know that same conversation was happening earlier in terms of investment banking. We've gone backwards substantially, and they're stretching to find people to make the list. And I think part of the problem is, not only is it that like these anchor institutions that we talked about are not interested in working with us, so that makes it really, really hard when such a big part of the marketplace doesn't want to work with minority firms at all. That's a problem. But the other problem is something that's happened. It's happened in all contracting, as well as professional services contracts, where they have had these definitions of size, that if you get past a certain size, they can no longer do business with you. And the federal government has those kind of goals in terms of federal procurement. And when it comes to money managers, they created this term, emerging money managers. So if you're over $2 billion, in most cities and states, people won't want to hire you. Now, $2 billion sounds like a lot of money, but I tell people that's like having a 4-person law firm. It's not a firm of scale. And as Brian talked about earlier, to be a successful minority-owned firm, you've got to have infrastructure, you've got to have technology, you've got to have compliance officers, you've got to have lawyers, you've got to have traders, you've got to have expert analysts, you've got to have extraordinary talent throughout your organization if you're going to compete with the larger guys. But if every time you get to be $2 billion, people tell you you're too big, we can't hire you, then the number of, then you can never, ever grow. So it's a real problem, and especially in our industry, as we said earlier, when there are firms that are $2 and $3 trillion in size, and you're $2 billion, you literally are a rounding error. And it's just kind of just this weird thing that's happened. So I give one example, which is one of the things one example I would give. I used to be on the board of Aon Corporation, the insurance company, for 17 years, and I chaired the audit committee, and I finally got to be the chair of the investment committee. So like I do everywhere, I say, if I'm going to be chair of the investment committee, we've got to have diversity and inclusion here. So the treasurer, this terrific guy, well-meaning, went out and did a search and came back with what he called 5 emerging managers that we were going to hire. And I said, well, where, so there was like 2 white men firm, a woman firm, a Latino firm, and 1 black firm. And because anybody under $2 billion, it can be white, it could be anything, it doesn't matter. As long as you're under $2 billion, that's what you're called an emerging firm. So I said, well, how about Eddie Brown, who's been in a firm that at the time had been in business, let's say, 28 years. Why can't we hire Eddie Brown here at Aon? Well, he said, well, they're too big. Eddie at the time had $5 billion. Again, a rounding error. But I said, well, Eddie's Lou Rukeyser Hall of Fame. He's Money Manager of the Year in this publication. He's fantastic. He's been a great citizen in Baltimore, doing all kinds of things to strengthen the urban community there. But he's too big. So I thought, this can't be, I said, that would be like if Branch Rickey said, we can't hire Jackie Robinson because he's too talented.
You know, we're going to go find an emerging baseball player for the D League, and let's see, give him a try and see if he's any good, and leave Jackie back playing in the Negro League. You know, it doesn't make any sense. But that is a big, big challenge of why our businesses haven't been able to get to scale, is because they've defined this firm of scale by such a small number. And of course, what we did there at Aon, we got Eddie Brown hired. He's done a fantastic job. At Exelon, where he got hired, he was 2 or 3 years, in his first 3 years, he was the top manager out of all the firms. You know, we want to survive. We want to celebrate our success stories and the firms that are doing well, not penalize them because they've had some modest success.
So, are you seeing the potential for, to get to size, and this is something we've been advocating, more mergers and more in the asset management space, so that you have these larger firms? And just as historical reference, when we look at, this is the 45th anniversary of the BE 100s, and each area where there hadn't been merger or acquisition activity, whether you're talking about hair care companies back in the day, whether you're talking about the insurance companies, whether you're now talking about the advertising agencies, those areas have gone away. Those areas are, no longer on our list, or there's very few on our list. Do you see more merger activity and acquisition activity among the African American financial services firms, so that you may have fewer firms, but they're larger firms? And is that needed?
I think it would be nice if some of the firms did merge, because then you'd have multi-product firms, and you'd be able to deal with the ups and downs in the economy and the challenges of different styles come and go if you had a more diverse list of products. So I think M&A makes a lot of sense in our industry, but it won't fix the problem, because I always tell Reverend Jackson this all the time. We need access to capital, that's important, but we need access to customers first and foremost. So as long as the customers aren't going to work with firms of scale, you're at a challenge. Or if you have, again, these universities' endowments that think that black folks aren't qualified to manage their endowment, it doesn't matter if you're a little bit bigger. And again, in some places, it'll hurt you to be a little bit bigger, as I said earlier.
Because of the merging venture.
So we have to, so at the end of the day, though, I think you're right. If we could get more firms of scale, we'd have more resources to try to make our case, and to be able to show people that we can do everything everyone else can do, and prove that we are gifted at this business too. So I think ultimately it probably would be helpful if the firms would be able to come together.
But in terms of that equation of opportunities, a lot of that rests with the investment consultants that these endowments and these foundations use. In fact, I just read a report from that Emmett Carson wrote, and he's the head of the Silicon Valley Community Fund, and he was wondering why they didn't have more, diverse managers. And it came down to his examination of the investment consultant that was making recommendations, and having that investment consultant change the way that they measure who is going to even be considered to be asset managers. Share with me your perspective on that, and how that can be changed so that we can have some more diversity in terms of the selection process.
I think the consulting field is critically important in our industry. They ultimately decide most of the time which pension funds and endowments will hire us. So that's really important. It's a challenging industry. There are a lot of great consultants out there, a lot who believe in diversity and inclusion. But the facts are, at least according to, there's a guy named Kwaku who works at Marquette Associates in Chicago. He's a partner there. He's one partner out of 20 partners. He says there's less than 5 African-American partners of consulting firms in the whole United States. Now, maybe he's off by a little bit. And Cara, I don't know if you know many, but actually the partnership level, it's really, really tiny. And we've got friends from Holland here, and it's just really rare to get partners. That's Kwaku's data. So if we have more people that look like us in senior roles in the consulting industry, things would get better for us. That's for sure. So we got to push to get more diversity into those industries. We have to have the customers demanding diversity in the consulting industry. That would work. The other thing that Emmett Carson did very eloquently and thoughtfully in his written report couple of years ago, is he talked about what was talked about earlier by Randall. He talked about the implicit bias and the unconscious biases that are still there in buyers of professional services everywhere. And he sort of, he got at it pretty directly in that he talked about the fact that he'd been involved with many foundations in his career, and he always realized this was the third rail. Once you started bringing up people of color managing the money, folks didn't want to hear about it. And it always brings me up an example. When I used to, a long time ago, 20 years more, I was president of Chicago Park District in Chicago. It was a volunteer position. And the Park District has 9 museums on parkland. So my idea was those museums should work with minority businesses across the board, and professional services included. So we decided to have a conference. We've all been to these conferences where the people who are the minority firms would come and meet with the representatives of the museums and hear, like we've done today, hear panels, hear discussions, and have a chance to meet with the buyers of the products. They came up with a logo for the conference, and it was a man in a hard hat with a shovel. And the tagline was digging up business. So that's what those museums in Chicago thought of minority businesses. They thought of it as a white man, they thought of it as a man in a hard hat with a shovel. They didn't have a picture of a man in front of a judge arguing a case, or someone doing code someplace, or creating a new computer, someone doing whatever. That was the stereotype. That was the implicit bias. That's how we were viewed. As I said earlier, that's exactly the way these university presidents think of us 20 years later, the same way those museum presidents thought about us 20 years ago. And we need to be able to break out of that. And that's why I've talked about getting this term to supplier diversity to become broader, to include business diversity, to at least try to get away from that implicit bias. That I think is part of the reason why often when you talk to these people, no one's ever asked them about using person of color when it comes to managing the money. So a lot of those consultants who are managing money for family offices or wealthy endowments, no one's ever pushed them on this issue before. And then you're expecting them to think about it for themselves?
So you're saying that the language, supplier diversity, that fuels that bias.
I think it fuels that bias and continues to perpetuate that bias. As I said earlier, my mom graduated from the University of Chicago Law School in 1946. She wanted to build her own law practice. All these, because she was a pioneer, and she would get opportunities to serve on this board and that board, this task force, this governmental agency or that one. And she'd ask the same white men who asked her to serve as the token woman on the board, can I be your lawyer? I'd love to be the lawyer for the Art Institute. I'd love to be the lawyer for Sara Lee Corporation. I'd love to be the lawyer for whatever. And they're like, well, no. Your role is to be the person in the room when we need diversity and inclusion. We don't think of you as a business lawyer person. We don't think, the white guy on the board, he's the smart guy who will help solve us our legal problems if we need to hire a lawyer. And so that's that implicit bias of how people view people of color. People don't want to talk about this. Like we talked about in the earlier panel, we got to get this out there and stop pretending that it's a fair, equal playing field when it isn't.
Well, one of the challenges is for people to be willing to have that tough conversation. How do you force that? I know some corporations are doing it, but for the most part, nobody wants to have that conversation. No one wants to really talk about the fact that there is, intentional actions that are done, or unintentional actions that are done, that are keeping people out of the room. And it requires having those hard conversations in order to change things. How do you foster that?
We talked at the risk of being repetitive to what we talked about earlier during the panel. I think we need to get our political leadership and our civil rights leadership on message around the importance of these issues. Because it used to be that, again, the political leaders in the past and the community leaders were all aligned about the importance of minority business. That businesses hired other minorities, they did business with other minority firms, the great businesses like Johnson Publishing or Johnson Products or whatever it was, that there was wonderful things came out for the community because those institutions thrived and grew. Same with companies like yours, the Black Enterprise. So we have to get ourselves on message, because if you go to all the conferences this summer, there'll be 20 different panels over 3 days at each conference, talking about a dozen different things, and not an ability to focus on one issue. Republicans do so much a better job of that. You know, when Reagan ran, he was like small government, strong defense, family values. You know, we know what the NRA stands for. You know, we know what Grover Norquist and his tax initiatives all about. We have to find a way, I think, to concentrate what's important around business development for minority-owned businesses and have that as a cornerstone where political and business leaders are going to be talking about it on a regular basis and realize that we have the power to make a difference.
Yeah. And
Last quick, sorry, long answer to you. But the other thing I said earlier, what you guys did at Black Enterprise while your cover story on Blacks on Boards, the Reverend Jackson took that data to Silicon Valley and totally shook it up. If we don't make sure that Black Enterprise and Ebony are strong publications, how do we get that information out there where then the civil rights leader can take that information and force those institutions to do the right thing and force Apple to have their first black director and Hewlett Packard to have 4 directors on their 2 companies and on down the line. You know, you've got to get them the data and information so they can be on message and then force this change. Change will not happen without the political and civil rights leaders forcing it through.
And I'm going to open it up to questions in a second, but I'd like to make a statement, but I'd like you to address it. It comes to what you're saying, it's about voice and having that voice out there. And part of the challenge is when you look at Black Enterprise and Ebony, we're the only 2 black-owned, and Ebony is on, has a gained investment from a black private equity fund. The only 2 national black-owned, publications, and I argue media companies, national, that is providing a voice. All the other entities, when you talk about Essence, BET, they're part of, white companies, and that creates a challenge in terms of getting the voice out there. And, and it requires us creating those vehicles so that we can have our voice and so that we can, cover, the leaders and so that we can cover activities such as this because, without entities like that, you have radio silence.
It's exactly right. And I tell people all the time, I've been talking about the University of Chicago a lot, how well they do. If you talk to Melly Span Cooper, who runs WVON Radio, the only black radio station in Chicago that's still alive, she says she made payroll one month because the University of Chicago Hospital advertised on WVON Radio. That's the place where, when Harold Washington got elected and Carol Moseley Braun got elected in those early days for President Obama, that was a place where our community would come together and celebrate those up-and-coming leaders and figure out ways to organize to help them get elected and make a difference for our community. If there's no WVON, maybe there's no Harold Washington. If there's no Harold Washington, maybe there's no Carol Moseley Braun, and maybe there's no Barack Obama. These things all come together. As I said earlier, your work on Silicon Valley is going to make a difference for multi-generations of people of color to have real opportunities in Silicon Valley. But I know there's a whole lot of folks who are sitting in their corporate offices not insisting that those corporations advertise in Black Enterprise. And then how do we move our community forward if we don't have that voice that's vibrant and vocal that can expose these things that need to be exposed?
All the pieces matter. We're going to open it up to questions right now. Do we have any questions on the floor? Right there.
Thank you so much. This has been very eye-opening. My name is, my name is Janelle Moody. I'm with BCT Partners, Principal and Vice President for Business Development. So I work with this fine young man here, Randall Pickett. I found that what I'm hearing today is resoundingly there's an awareness to action that needs to take place. And having you here, Mr. Little, would be able to bring some enlightenment onto some of the things I'm hearing. For example, with board members that are African American or diverse board members who actually are in these roles and positions but aren't actually doing anything. So that's something new to me. How do we use data analytics or analytics to analyze what's happening, report it, so that it gives the impetus to unearth some of the problems and go ahead and take some action behind it? Because a lot of times it's about awareness.
Actually, that's a great question. John has a conference, Board of Directors conference, and they go through looking at various regions and board activities and what have you, and do a very effective job. I think our next level in terms of the evolution of our list is to look at board member effectiveness. You know, how are those board members that are on our list, that are part of our registry, having an impact in their corporation? And obviously, that's a challenging piece, but I'm going to go to you, John, and Charles to help with that, because that's the next stage. First, we have to diversify the boards, you know, and, you know, I'm extremely proud of the work we did, and I'm extremely proud that we provided that information so that we could diversify boards in Silicon Valley, Google, you know, Apple. You know, we just expose them, and that's how it's going to happen. And very proud to have the partnerships with Rainbow Push and with John to do that. But I think the next piece, as you said, is to look at, you know, individual board members, and of course we celebrate those who are doing things, but also you got to put a spotlight on those who aren't, because that's going to get, you know, once you embarrass people, and unfortunately that's what it takes, and you expose the lack of activity, then you start to see movement. But if you don't, nothing's going to happen. It's still going to be status quo. People are going to be comfortable getting their compensation and not moving the needle. And I think, you know, John and Bruce Gordon and some others say it's right. Part of the role for people of color to be on boards is to ask the questions to move diversity. And a lot of times, these board members don't even ask the question. It's not even about being, you know, antagonistic. It's about asking the question why certain things aren't happening in the company, and if you did this, it would impact shareholder value. And that's the reason why they're supposed to be there in part, in addition to, you know, what the value they can add based on their credentials and their pedigree.
And then one other data point I would add, just from a data standpoint, I'm looking at Cara, because she worked for the city comptroller in New York and the state comptroller in New York. They both do a great job there on these issues. And one of the things we talked about was private equity being a place that people didn't know much about. And so I always ask the question, you know, people know Henry Kravitz founded KKR, which is one of the largest private equity firms in the country. How many employees do you think KKR has? Someone want to guess? 500. They have over 1 million employees.
Yeah.
It's because they control all these companies. And so I always give the other example. Bruce Rauner in Illinois, I mentioned earlier, is our governor, was private equity guy at GTCR. During the debates with Governor Quinn several years ago, it came out that Bruce had invested in 400 companies at GTCR. Well, that means you've got 400 CEOs, 400 CFOs, 400 general counsels. Let's say each of those boards had 7 directors, board members. That would be 2,800 board members. No one asked him how many of those executive suite jobs or board people were people of color. How many were women? No one ever asked those questions. It's just amazing. Just think how much power and influence is now in these heads of these private equity firms. They are the masters of the universe. They're multi-billionaires. They control millions of jobs. They control tens of thousands of contracts, thousands of board seats, and they've gotten a free pass from, you know, including us in anything. And that was one of the conversations we were having in New York, is that the influence that the customer has to force them to change their behavior is substantial.
Yeah, another example would be with Frederick Lewis, when he had Johnson Publication, Johnson Products for years, doing about $200 million in revenue. Out of nowhere, he comes with over $1 billion in revenue. The private equity doesn't buy it. So there's a lot of leverage in that space.
That's why it actually is an ecosystem. You're exactly right. If we were able to get in there and have some, you know, like most of the major private equity firms in Chicago have never had a black professional, let alone a black partner in the firm. So the amount of impact and influence you would have, not only on all the companies they've invested in, but then, as you're suggesting, then be able to also invest in minority-owned companies and help take them private, give them the financing they need to grow, be a customer for them.
Yeah.
And then that's the final thing I'd say about customers. You know, it's a little bit of a bank shot, but McDonald's, where I'm on the board, they have over 300 African-American franchisees, but they do business with dozens of suppliers. And because McDonald's is their customer, those suppliers are then able to go and do work with all the other fast food chains and build businesses that are now dotting the BE 100 list. There's a disproportionate amount of restaurant companies that are on that list because McDonald's was their first big customer. So, long way of saying private equity can make a big difference in capital, they can be a customer, and they can really change the lives of a lot of people of color if they really want to.
All righty. Well, again, Emmett, Exeline, you brought in the big guns. Give a round of applause, please, to both of these wonderful panelists, John Rogers and Derek
Great
Dingle.
job.
And before we move on, I also want to thank Janelle Moody from BCT Partners for asking a good question. You know, somebody asked me on the break, okay, so who was it that gave you your best advice? And actually, my mother, she gave me 2 bits of advice. One was, if you're going to do it right the first time. And then she said, it's okay to ask a question because it's better to be a fool for a minute than a lifetime. Ask the question. Okay, so ask the question. To recap what these wonderful gentlemen talked about today, I want to go back to what Mr. Dingle said, that Earl Graves said about going into harm's way. We talked a little bit earlier about fear and other things of that nature, but Cynthia shared her story earlier today, and that's not a story of knowing that you will be provided for, and if you go into harm's way with good intentions, things tend to work out. So I think a lot of us have to be fearless in what we do in life. And you also mentioned too about not being afraid to fail. It's the consequences of the failure, but I think, you know, when I do a lot of mentoring, and I tell people all the time, it's not so much about the adversity, but how you manage the adversity and how you are being perceived when you manage that adversity. So that's one point. And then also, to Mr. Rogers' point about celebrating those who are actually actively involved in doing things and board members, that's very important. I know at AT&T, part of our best practices is we have a newsletter and we celebrate people who are doing good things. I write the newsletter and we always talk about those who are doing things. So it's interesting that, you know, people want that accolades and they need to get that. Some people are very humble, but you need to give it to them. I'll share an interesting story. When I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I was prosecuting people, and right here in Newark on Broad Street under Secretary Chertoff, and when we were cutting plea deals, a lot of people wouldn't take the deal because they didn't want to be in the newspaper, because they didn't want to be embarrassed. They'd rather go to jail than to put in the paper that they were arrested. So I found that very interesting, how publicity or lack thereof has a lot of leverage in terms of managing situations. And then getting back to the question that Ms. Moody asked from BCT Partners, you know, as I'm always branding people and putting names in there trying to help folk out. Quantitative analysis. I'm going to share another story with you that I had. One of our board members, Keisha Blake, she's with the WeBank and the WePo, and I do a brown bag luncheon, sort of like a fireside chat like we're doing now. And there was a woman who was involved in a business, but she was working from her home. And she said there was this perception that people didn't want to hire her because she was working from her home. So I told her that, again, quantitative analysis is very important. Perhaps you can find some studies that show that people who work from home have business savings. I said, and you also have to use examples, people who are disruptive, like the Bolt bus, okay? I never rode a Bolt bus until my son, who was at Columbia, he was a starving student, he was like, take the Bolt bus, Mom. I'm like, I'm not taking no Bolt bus, but I took it and it was fine, okay? But they have low overhead because they don't have the station. So they were very disruptive. They started going into other people's territories because they were Uber, all those different entities, they were disruptive. But I'm sure they had to have some type of quantitative analysis to get the approval to do all this stuff because they were saving money. So it's always about cost savings and being disruptive, going back to what was said earlier, thinking outside the box and thinking about what people need. Again, this goes back to what I was telling you about, you know, do your homework before you go in there. You don't want to keep giving somebody something that they already have. Give them something that's different. So bear that in mind as well. And also, I wanted to talk about repeat what you were saying, John Rogers, about access to capital and customers. That's very, very important because it goes back to what we're doing here today and the whole notion of relationships, okay? It's all about relationships, it's all about perception, it's all about having access to not just capital, but to customers. So I'll say this, there's more to come. I hope this is a reflection to all of you of what the New Jersey Board of Public Utility Supply Diversity Development Council does, okay? You may not know us like AT&T, you may not know us like some of the other branded companies, but the SDDC is doing really good work, and we have a board who are here to help you. So I really hope that all of you attend our conference on September 12th. I will tell you there will be a charge for it. We don't have a sponsor for that one, but it'll be worth every penny of it because we are doing good work, and I hope you continue to keep in contact with us. We have more to come. It's getting better. Stacey Curtis will be our new president next year. I sad to say it was a 2-year term, and again, you're talking about 9 months pregnancy. I have 9 more months. I'm trying to, enjoy this as much as I can, the journey. But I hope and sincerely pray that all of you stay in contact with you because it's all about having this access to relationships. Have a link that says opportunities. I know that Con Ed had an opportunity for food service trucks. It was amazing. Who knew a food service truck? And I happened to be on the telephone with somebody who was a financial planner manager. It was something that was sort of off the chart. And when I got the email, I was telling them about how we are always looking for opportunities in networking and helping out. And I said, yeah, this just came through for the food services truck. And he said, oh, I know someone who does food service. And that person ended up applying for that. So you never know where your blessing's going to lie, okay? Again, everybody's important. And continue to build those relationships with everyone. Everyone in this room is important. So with that being said, can we give them a standing ovation? Because this is just good stuff. Can we give them a round of applause and a standing ovation for their good work? We thank them so very much.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My mom was a first African-American assistant U.S. attorney.
Wow. We have another bit of history. His mother was the first. Give him another round of applause. Thank you so much. Okay, moving along. Our next presentation is going to be an overview of Exelon's Investment Office and Minority-Owned Investment Manager Program. Brian Anderson is going to come forward and give us a presentation, so come on up. Thank you so very much. Let's give him a round of applause.
All right, good afternoon. Hopefully the screen doesn't block me. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Brian Anderson. I'm a Managing Director in the Exelon Investment Office. And I'm just going to talk a little bit today. I won't take too much of your time, but I'm going to talk about our investment office and how it's run and kind of how the minority and women-owned investment manager program fits in with what we do at Exelon. So, I just start off and say we're all very proud of the program. It's number one, it's delivered solid, positive alpha from our managers, and that's the biggest thing. That's what we focus on. And then when we look at it in terms of kind of second order effects, also I think the indirect benefits of the program have been very positive in terms of, I think, managers will tell us that, kind of a small manager landing their first institutional client is kind of huge. Once you get a name, I'd like to think that we're a pretty good name, but you get an Exelon as an investor, it's a lot easier to get the next large institutional investor. And then I think Brian Aarons, who spoke about Prudential earlier, I think one of the other benefits that we provide from time to time is sort of helping with that infrastructure and with smaller managers, kind of helping them to understand what is institutional quality and what people are looking for. And Bill Von Haney from Exelon has a great story about a manager he met that we had looked at. We told them they weren't kind of quite ready for prime time for these reasons. The manager thanked him. They came back a year later. They had kind of implemented everything that we had said, and we ended up investing with them, and so it was a nice story. So I think overall we're very happy with the program. I'm going to kind of just offer my perspective of, I'm not the architect of the program. John Rogers, is really one of the big architects, and he could kind of talk, a much better level about implementing it, but I'll maybe just kind of try to give my view from the trenches and how it fits in. And so it's kind of fairly seamless. We don't break it out. I think some people break out, either whether it's an emerging manager program, minority-owned program is separate. We We hold everybody the same standard. We don't have sort of specific targets. We just focus on making sure that we're promoting diversity and inclusion as much as we can. So, as I go through it, you won't see really anything that's different about what we do with all our managers. Maybe I'll just read a couple things about our program, but again, it's kind of fits in with everything we do. But diversity and inclusion are very important to Exelon and factors into everything we do. So the purpose of our investment management program is to provide the investment trusts with high-quality investment managers while also providing opportunities for qualified minority and women-owned investment firms. And then finally, just kind of one other point is we want investment managers that can make a difference in our investment program, and we want to make a meaningful difference in their business. So that meaningful difference is kind of the indirect things I talked about coming out of the program. But that's kind of really it in terms of like something that's unique to the program. We want to promote it, but it's not set up as any kind of different infrastructure. So if you think about it from a corporation or a public plan that wants to implement it, maybe others would say it's hard, but I don't think it's too hard from how you fit into what you're doing. I think the harder part is the soft side that people have spoken a lot about in terms of developing the culture of diversity and inclusion and getting people to maybe look at the manager that, it's easy to pick the two guys that came out of Goldman, but two managers that don't have that kind of same firm name behind them often will get dropped out. So I think what we try to do is make sure we cast the net as broadly as we can. So maybe the second slide in terms of the organization, I would just say, I think the way you can include diversity and inclusion, what you do is the leadership. That's huge. And it comes from the top down at Exelon. And then if you think about even promoting it, I think it obviously it helps to have diversity within your investment office. So, under the leadership of Doug Brown, who came in 2009, he's built out a new investment team at Exelon. It's a diverse team in terms of gender, race, even professional experience. And I think, to some of the studies that were quoted earlier, I think that kind of diversity usually results in better outcomes because you're getting different viewpoints. And I think that has worked very well for us. So in terms of who I am, I'm the second from the left in terms of I'm the managing director for public markets and NDT Investments, which are nuclear decommissioning trusts. I'll just explain that a little bit more later if anyone's probably not that interested, but it's a big part of what we do. So, and then, within my team, I have two direct reports on the public market side. For us, that's fixed income equities. So Chanel Brown, who I think several of you know, she is responsible for sourcing, getting implemented into the portfolio and monitoring all the managers in our equity book across all our trusts. And then Arthur Olunwa on my team has a similar responsibilities for fixed income. So if we could go to the next slide on corporate governance. I think our governance structure is wonderful in terms of, there's strong oversight, but yet we have a lot of latitude to manage things, and it's not overly rigid in terms of how we manage. But, as it relates to minority-owned firms, I would say that whole point about, infrastructure-wise, it isn't hard for us. It's promoting it, and it's the leadership from the top to build that into the culture. So, if you look at us, we have our investment committee, board committee is led by John Rogers, who, you all know, and he's a strong advocate, and he's a big proponent. So it's something that we definitely focus on. And then that committee has the general oversight for us. We meet with them 3 times a year. And then we also have a corporate level committee in the middle there, the Corporate Investment Committee. That's led by Bill Von Haney, who is, an unbelievably strong advocate of diversity and inclusion at Exelon. So, if you think about our leadership, and then Doug Brown, who they've brought in as the CIO, is a big proponent as well. So that top-down leadership is something that really helps build the culture, and I think that has been a strong reason for the success of our program. So then I would just mention, in terms of the structure, that Corporate Investment Committee approves policies and procedures. It approves investment allocations, but they delegate to the investment office, that's us at the bottom there, kind of the day-to-day responsibilities. So in terms of Exelon, the 15 of us, we do the hiring and firing of managers. We don't have consultants other than for asset liability studies and things like that. And I think to earlier comments, I can completely see how having a consultant between you and the investment managers would not be the best way to promote diversity, because they tend to want to do the safest thing at every turn. And so that's I'm sure a big part of the problem for a lot of people getting in the door. But that's not a problem at Exelon, obviously. So turn to the next slide. Just kind of take you through our different pools of money. We have $40 billion under management. If you look at the pie chart, pension assets about $18 billion. That's largely traditional pension money, but we do have a growing cash balance plan. We have about 75,000 participants in the plan. Then the nuclear decommissioning trust that I own, that's sort of my side job. That's money that is set aside to decommission nuclear plants after their active life is over. So there's a plant called Oyster Creek south of here in New Jersey that's going to shut down in 2019. So some of the money in that $11 billion is set aside to decommission that plant when it shuts down. And I would just mention, this is as of the end of February, we acquired another unit from Entergy called Fitzpatrick, so we actually have close to $13 billion now in NDT dollars. So I'm looking for when we exceed the pension dollars. That's my goal. And then we have VEBA money, and then the savings plan. We have about 35,000 participants. That's employee-directed money. I'll talk about a little bit of that in a second. If you turn to slide, I think it's 5. This is kind of, are you on? It's pension asset allocation development. Sorry, hopefully we're on. So I apologize, this is a little bit of a busy slide, but really the point here is to highlight the evolution of our asset allocation and really where we are today. So the current portfolio to the right is where we are in terms of assets. We're basically a third of the assets are in a liability hedge, a third are long-only equities, and a third are other return-generating assets. And as it relates to our minority and investment manager program, I would say if you look at all the different kind of sub-asset classes within that pie chart, 8 of the 12 asset classes have at least one minority-owned manager within it. And I would say that probably based upon our pipeline, we'll probably have managers within 10 of those 12 sub-asset classes by the end of the year. So it's really across the board in what we do. And if we flip ahead, I think it's slide 7. I'm going to skip one. It's the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust. Is that there? Okay, sorry. So I think I explained a little bit about the NDTs. I just say in terms of what we try to do there, unlike the pension where we have a big liability hedge, NDTs, it's really more of we've moved to a total return approach, and we kind of focus on inflation risks unless the unit is a unit like the Oyster Creek that I mentioned that's shutting down soon, and then we might have more of a hedging type portfolio. But the reality is the liability is pretty hard to predict, and it's not like a pension, so we think more kind of a total return. So just high level, the fixed income side within that, we have investment grade credit, we have TIPS, we have emerging market debt, and then we have floating rate debt, which is predominantly middle market lending. And on the equity side, we have the Russell 3000, EFA, and EM. And then in terms of alternatives, that's a growing portfolio. We have 2%, but as you can see in the target allocation table to the right of that, we have a 15% target. So that's a new program, and we're building that out. I would say in terms of what we do with minority-owned firms, there really isn't much of an influence here yet. This is a portfolio that's taxable, that has some large taxable gains, so it's not a portfolio that is easily turned over, but I think over time we'll be like all our other trusts where we have minority-owned firms in it as well. Turning to the next slide, the VEBA retirement healthcare assets. This is a similar allocation to the pension, just with 2 differences. There's no liability hedge, so fixed income is really Barclays Ag, high yield, and emerging market debt. And then we have no private equity because the liquidity constraints are a little different. We need a little bit more liquidity than we need in the pension. And then finally, I would mention the employee savings plan. That's the kind of last bucket of money. We had a major rehauling of the program in 2014, and as part of that process, there had been no minority or women-owned firms within our prior savings plan lineup. We now have, I don't know the number, but a fair number within that allocation when we rebucketed. So we basically re-enrolled everybody, tried to get as many people into target date plans as possible, I don't know if John's in the room, but John is a big advocate of at our board meetings, we get a lot of questions about, the participation in the savings plan. And, there's really no direct benefit to Exelon from rebranding or whatever, but it's a big focus in terms of employees and making sure that, people are participating, they understand the benefits of a savings plan and saving for retirement. So that is a big focus as well. The next page just kind of talks through how we do our process, and like I said, it's seamless between what we do with any manager and a minority-owned or women-owned manager. So this is the diligence process. It's really owned by what we call the portfolio manager, so like Arthur and Chanel on my team. What we're trying to do, and I think where this relates to minority-owned firms, is widening the net and making sure that we're capturing everybody. So whether it's meeting people at forums like this, going through eVestment, we're trying to make sure that we are seeing a wider pool of firms and not just kind of going with the same names that everybody knows. And I think that gets to the culture, and that's a big part about how you can have a successful program. So, kind of the end, I won't go through this step by step, but the second from the bottom, there's the manager approval process. And that's basically a meeting where the portfolio manager puts together an investment thesis, maybe 10 to 15 pages, and seeks to get approval, and we vote on it on a manager. So it's the same process for everybody. We don't have I think the example of the blind auditions for the musicians. We don't have that, but I can think back to how we run the program, and we've had probably 2 managers of the last 3 or 4 that have been minority or women-owned firms. And if you go through that investment memo, I mean, it's not blind. You can often figure it out, but it doesn't spell it out. It's a manager just like everybody else, and that's kind of how we do it. So the next page is just kind of highlighting the evolution. Again, this is probably something Rogers could speak much more eloquently than me, but I didn't not the architect. I walked into a program that already existed, but just for a little history, it began back in 2002 with about $30 million, and it was all invested through fund of funds. When Doug Brown came in, Doug, John, Bill Von Haney kind of decided to change the focus and focus more on direct relationships, and I think that's been a big benefit, I think, in terms of those indirect effects. We're not going through a fund of funds. We're directly interacting with the managers, and I think that, giving that feedback about what they need to be institutional quality for smaller managers, I think is probably quite helpful. So, the big bump up you can see around 2013-14 is when we brought some of the new managers into the savings plan. So today we have about $2 billion and roughly 20 managers, and like I said, it's across most of the asset classes in terms of equities, fixed income, private equity, real estate, and hedge funds, and private credit as well. We have managers that are in all of those different sub-asset classes. And so, yeah, I mean, I would just say, again, I think it's in terms of how do you promote a plan, I know there's large public plans that build it out as separate programs. I prefer our way, and maybe because we're a little bit smaller, but I think it is seamless with what we do. It doesn't require any extra work. It's really the promoting of the culture and having it start with kind of top leadership down is how you can have a successful program. Yeah, sure. Only if they're easy.
Thank you. You have some great practices, maybe best practices that I've seen. And actually, I'm saying seen, but I struggle to read the slides.
Yeah.
Would you mind, is it possible for everyone here maybe to get a copy of this or email? Don't you have to disclaimer with legal, just something? Because I was trying to take notes and it was just so hard to read it.
Yes, I'd be glad to.
Thank you. It's so valuable, the shape.
Deanna Hobson, Director of Marketing with Pew Capital. And mine is more of a comment. A few weeks ago, I was meeting with Brian and members of his team, and after our meeting, they were all rushing off to do some tutoring. And I mention that because, you know, Exelon is more than just an organization that talks about this. It's their commitment to the community is very much integrated into all their business practices, and I just wanted to mention that and acknowledge Brian and his team for the work they do in the community.
Thank you.
Let's give him another round of applause. Thank you so very much. And I can't say enough about Exelon. I know from working with Emmett and Bernice, they have best practices and that they're very good at what they do. And again, certainly a common key factor that transcends this is that there's a lot of community work. Thank you for pointing that out. You know, it's a Gestalt theory. It's an entire package. And again, relationships with all facets of life. So as always, we save the best for last. So I'm going to introduce Emmett Vaughn. I know most of you know him, but you may not know a lot about his background. So I'm going to take the time to read his bio so that you know just how deep his breath runs. And I can sit here and sing this forever, but I'll say this over and over again. Emmett and Vernice have been spectacular. And John Harmon, they have exceeded my expectations. I've done a lot of these functions, a lot of these events, and a lot of people have come up to me since the beginning of this program mentioning to me that they want to do this again in the future. So I know that we have your email. We will try to get this pushed out to you again because this is just the start of something. I mean, this is like the chapter 1. I feel like we could write a thesis on what's going on here. More to come. But I can't thank Emmett and Vernice and Exelon for affording the SCDC to have this fabulous opportunity and to sponsor us. I hope you all appreciate the way I did, and this is a well worthwhile investment of our time because people are busy. People are very busy, and I see that you guys are real troopers. You stuck it through the whole day, and I know why. This is good stuff. So I want you to give a round of applause for Emmett, and I'm going to give you his bio in just a second. Well, yeah, okay, all right. No. I have to say this. In his role, Emmett provides strategic direction and oversight for over $1.9 billion of business done between Exelon and diversity certified businesses annually. He is the director of the Office of Diverse Business Empowerment. I think that word empowerment fits you perfectly because you are certainly empowered. And again, you are just an awesome, phenomenal man. Additionally, he serves the Corporate Investment and Finance Group on their interface and minority investment bankers, managing over $2 billion of Exelon financial assets. He joined the company in 2005, has been the catalyst for much of the success in national supply diversity and economic development initiatives that Exxon has been credited with. Over $4.5 billion in new business for DCBs has been realized under Emmett's leadership. $4.5 billion under Emmett. Exelon Corporation is the nation's largest power generation electric utility company. In addition to being the parent company of Chicago-based ComEd, Philadelphia's Pepco Energy, Maryland's Baltimore Gas and Electric, and Washington, D.C.'s Pepco Holdings, Exelon owns electric generation and commercial market sales divisions that cover 47 states. I want to get back to Emmett himself. Throughout his career, he has several awards for professional achievement. Emmett has received the Lifetime Achievement Award by the U.S. Department of Commerce, Minority Business Development Agency for contribution to regional minority business growth. He was recognized in 2011 by the Minority Business News magazine, USA, as one of the best supplier diversity professionals of the past decade. The same publication has recently listed him as one of the 75 most influential executives in supplier diversity. His accomplishments as an often requested speaker on minority, business, and economic development are notable, as in recent months he was featured speaker at the Frasernet Power Networking Conference, the White House Global Economic Summit, and the National Black MBA Conference. Emmett earned his MBA from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University and currently shares his wealth of experience as a professor in the School of Business at Chicago State University. Locally, he's a member of the American Cancer Society Board of Directors. Nationally, he serves on the boards of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation in Washington, D.C., and the National Utilities Diversity Council in Los Angeles. His personal affiliations include
Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity and various ministries as member of the Salem Baptist Church of Chicago. Join me in welcoming and giving him a standing ovation. Emmett, you are the man. Thank you so very much. Let's give him a round of applause. Please stand up. This would not be happening without Emmett and Bernice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Emmett's going to explain about the one-on-one. Thank you, Emmett. I got to give you a big hug. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was really telling her that she could save several minutes and give you guys more time to talk to each other. One thing I will say, and Yvette has been so good and effusive in praising the team, let's offer for Yvette's, just her effort and her spirit as a facilitator. Please give her a round of applause for everything she's done. And if you're like me, you'll never look at anything yellow again. I mean, I think she will ever be forever attached. You know, yellow roses, yellow light, lemons. I mean, Yvette will be forever etched in our minds. So let's get to, I do want to acknowledge a person that has been cited several times today, and Vernice Lewis, who in our Exelon family of companies, Vernice is the oversight manager for what was our legacy PA. She runs my office in Philadelphia, but she is oversight over Atlantic City Electric and Delmarva Power. Vernice, please stand and be recognized. Look at that. There you go. You got people. Yeah. And the luckiest man in the world, I call him out. He's like my brother-in-law. I just see Deacon Lewis at the back. You know what I mean? All clean. We never get Deacon Lewis any up, so we get him there. Also, Charlie Partridge, who runs my office in Washington, D.C., and Frank Kelly, who runs the office in Baltimore. You guys stand, the whole team. We appreciate the both of you. So, and I'm hoping, Yvette, you're somewhere because, oh, there you are. Yvette Franklin, again, our event planner. So, you know, putting together something like this, it came together quickly. We hope it's been worth your while. A couple selfish asks, because this is really the benediction. After you get done with your meetings, you'll be on traveling safely. What we hope is, first of all, this was a bold strike. Yvette mentioned in something less than a year ago, we were very fortunate to become a part of the New Jersey region by virtue of our relationship with Atlantic City Electric. And Vince Mayone, you guys should know, first of all, two of our corporate president in Dave Velasquez, who you heard from earlier, and Vince Mayone, who is the president of Atlantic City Electric, they were literally here up until about 10 minutes ago. That's just, when you talk about the levels of commitment in the organization, those guys could have begged off at any time, and they really hung throughout the whole thing. So, you know, everybody's got a voice, and Yvette's theme throughout the day has been everybody makes a difference. I am hopeful that those of you who are businesses that are affiliated or are closely knit to the state of New Jersey, a couple things. The SDDC, headed by my close friend and colleague for so many years, John Harmon. This is an organization that if you are not a part of or a supporter of, you should absolutely consider that. That's all I'll say. It's just some things that the more succinct you say it, the more it impacts you. And Brian, thank you. I did not want to. You know, Brian came in. Believe me, Brian saved our bacon. That's what we just say in a lot of ways. You know what I mean, with a lot of people. And thank you very, very much on behalf of. If you didn't thank, on behalf of our Chief Investment Officer Doug Brown, who is so known as one of the best in the business, and you've seen evidence of it. Why? So we are going to get to what we're doing here. I digress only for a moment. In the utility environment that we work in, rates, utility relationships with our regulators are very, very important. One of the reasons, not necessarily the selfishly motivated reason, but we walk a fine balance between being a great service provider, hopefully, and I know my colleague Sue Hogan from PSCG is here, and so hopefully not overstepping any other boundaries. It's important that your voice help set the tone for the decision-making context of everything that takes place in that balance of regulatory responsibility, which it is absolutely consumer and economic responsible, and our ability as utilities to deliver great services, keep the lights on wherever you guys plug in, whatever you guys are plugging in. And let's be clear, nobody's buying less stuff to plug in. I mean, that's just, you know, if anything, think about most of you people are old enough in the room to remember whatever you plugged in and you hit the button, it hummed before it came on. And so, you know what I'm talking about. So with the evolution you've seen in the complexities of being a good utility, we are hopeful that a day like today, that you find your own subtext of return on investment that you'll share not only with our respective leadership, with other people in this great industry that you come in contact with, but with those that many of you have interfaced with your legislators and regulators. Tell them what you saw here today, because it's so important to help balance those books and balance that perspective. If there's any question, our industry is a good growth industry. Michael Jones Bay from across the, I forgot Mike, you've been from New York. Con Ed, Mike, I gave Sue ups and that's it. But share any joy, important, share it with our respective leadership, but also share it with your legislators and regulators. They need to know. These are oftentimes untold stories, and we all benefit when everybody gets that balance. So that's my little editorial moment. Now, so what we're going to have happen today, Yvette said, okay, give me sure I'm right. We go to a different room, right, Yvette? Across the hall, somebody should have directed them, and their table sign over that way. Out, and when you're facing going out the door, you go to the right. And there'll be tables that'll be marked with the individual institutions. Many of you signed up for them. Thank you very much. I will help my institution and organization friends, hopefully. This is not the sales call day. This is the quick introduction day as to why you're viable and why, hopefully based on a lot of the fuel we've given you today, that you are a company that should be considered for a later meeting. Today is not that meeting, because there would inevitably be somebody waiting in line behind you. So make good, strong introductions. Trust the intellect of the people sitting on both sides of the table. I give that to the institutional people, but don't let it end today. Make something happen. Make it happen with vigor and commitment. The same type of leadership we saw from all the speakers here today. I thank everybody for being so responsive. We thank you for being here. Good luck this afternoon, and continue to support all that we're doing, SDDC, and tell the story of great companies like AT&T and ours that are here. Thank you very, very much.
That just about concludes our program. I do want to give everybody a little respite for 5 minutes. I know we've been sitting for a while, so we're going to start the actual one-on-ones. It is now 2:22, so we'll say 2:30. We'll start at 2:30 to get this going. So take a little break, and then we'll see you over there. Thank you, and give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you. God bless, and safe travels to everyone. Adios, sayonara, and goodbye. Great day. Thank you. Safe travels, everyone.